Welcome to the new video in What If series, which you can tell from the title is called What If All Might Was Deku's Dad. You can probably tell what this What If is all about from that alone, so there won't be much to explain. Basically, we'll be exploring the idea of All Might being Deku's real, completely related father, and see how it would change the story of My Hero Academia. Now, to set the story off, we need to make it so All Might meets Inko, aka Deku's mom, which is easy to do. Not long after All Might, or Toshinori as we'll be referring to him as for now, gets into UA, he ends up bumping into a young lady about his age while on the way home from school. While at the train station, he gets distracted and walks into a girl, causing her to drop everything that she was holding onto the ground. Toshinori, completely embarrassed, apologizes multiple times and begins to pick up everything off of the floor when the girl says not to worry about it, and begins to help pick up things using her quirk to levitate a few of the small items into her hand. Toshinori notices and remarks, "That's quite an interesting quirk you have. The ability to move objects like that is very useful." The girl replies, "Not really. I can only levitate small objects. It's kind of worthless for anything other than grabbing the remote without getting out." Toshinori then says, "Hey, I know a few people who'd love to be able to do that, including me." The girl and Toshinori share a laugh, and then he introduces himself, with the girl then introducing herself. "It's nice to meet you, Toshinori. I'm Inko." The two of them begin to talk while waiting for their trains and eventually go their separate ways, but not before exchanging phone numbers. After that, Toshinori and Inko become close friends and even develop slight feelings for each other, but besides that, nothing much changed for Toshinori's school life and education to become a pro hero. That is, until Toshinori's master, Nana Shimara, is killed by All For One. Toshinori, just like in the canon, is devastated by it, and becomes more determined to defeat All For One, but Inko notices that something's wrong, and visits Toshinori to check up on him. During the visit, Toshinori decides to confide to Inko, telling her how someone who was like family to him had been killed by a villain, being sure to leave out any specifics and detail about what really happened, in the secret of One For All. After Toshinori finishes telling Inko this, he begins to cry, but Inko runs up and hugs him tight and says, "I'm so sorry you lost someone close to you, Toshinori. I can't imagine how much pain you're feeling right now, but I'm here for you." Toshinori then thanks Inko for being so kind, and not too long after that, Inko and Toshinori begin dating. Though, Toshinori does everything he can to keep it a secret, fearing that maybe All For One would target her to get to him. Then, near the end of Toshinori's final year at UA, Gran Torino finds out about Toshinori's relationship with Inko and scolds him harshly, telling him how he was putting her at risk and needs to cut things off, but Toshinori refuses to do so, and they begin to argue. Eventually, Gran Torino relents and says, "Okay, fine. If you won't break things off, then you should at least tell her what she's getting into by staying with you, so she knows the risks. In other words, tell her the truth about One For All and All For One. That is, if you trust her." Toshinori nods his head and agrees to tell Inko the truth. He then leaves and contacts Inko to meet up somewhere private, and when they do, Toshinori proceeds to tell Inko the full truth about his power, his master, and an awful villain named All For One, which shocks and confuses her. Toshinori then tells Inko that he understands if she's not comfortable being with him anymore, and if she wants, he'll leave her alone. But Inko just hugs Toshinori and says, "I don't care about any of that. I love you and I'll be with you no matter what." The two of them embrace each other and promise to stay together no matter what. A promise that will be broken. After Toshinori leaves UA, he begins to travel abroad in the US to continue his studies and to learn more about being a pro. During this time, Inko and Toshinori have a long-distance relationship and continue to keep in touch. But other than that, nothing else changes until All Might makes his debut as a new pro hero and returns to Japan slightly sooner than originally to see Inko again. All Might uses his disguises to meet with Inko in secret and to be with her when he wasn't doing hero work, all in an attempt to keep All For One from discovering their relationship, and they decided not to get married until the villain was no longer a threat. Then a few years later, Inko discovers that she's pregnant with All Might's child. Once All Might found out, he decided that in order to keep his unborn child and the woman he loved safe from any harm, he would need to leave and stay out of their lives. After a difficult conversation, they both agreed that it would be the best thing to do, and with the help of an old friend of Inko's, a man named Hisashi Midoriya, who will pose as Inko's husband and father of her child. Before All Might left, he promised Inko that he'll always make sure that her and his child would be taken care of, and promised to come back once All For One was defeated. then gave her and Hisashi special contact information so that he'll at least know how his child is doing and so he can know if anything is going on, or if they need help. And with that, All Might leaves to continue his fight against All for One. About 9 months later, Izuku Midoriya is born, and a day later, Inku sends pictures to multiple family members of Izuku, saying how she has a beautiful child now thanks to his incredible father, and sends it to All Might as well. Seeing the pictures, he gets a feeling of both joy and sadness, wishing he could be there right now, but knows he has to defeat All for One now more than ever, not just because he's a hero, but also to make a better world for his son to grow up in. As time moves on, Izuku grows up just like in canon, and admires All Might just as much, which makes Inku even happier than originally, because he's looking up to his father. Inku also continues to keep All Might up to date on Izuku, with vague messages, acting like old friends, just keeping in touch. Everything is going fine until a visit to the doctors reveals that Izuku appears to be quirkless, which is still devastating to Izuku, though it hurts Inku slightly more to tell her son that he can't be a hero. A few days later, Inku tells All Might about how Izuku will never develop a quirk, and is saddened by the news, knowing how awful his son must feel. More years pass and Izuku's life is pretty much the same as in canon. The man he believes is his father is working abroad, and he doesn't really remember him much, and he is of course bullied by Bakugo and the others for being quirkless. But then the day that All Might and All for One fight arrives, which ends with All Might still sustaining severe injuries, which limits how long he can work as a pro. But he believes that he killed All for One, and while in the hospital, he decides to contact Inko. However, before he can, he has a falling out with Sir Night-Eye, where the prediction of All Might's brutal death is revealed. However, it is different. When All Might gets a chance, he contacts Inko to tell her that he defeated All for One, but he wouldn't be coming home. Inko then asks, "What? But why? If All for One is gone, then why can't you finally be a part of your son's life? Why can't we be together again?" All Might replies, "Because I've been out of our son's life ever since he was born. I don't feel I have the right to even call myself his father, and besides, if I did, then it would be for only a short while." All Might then explains how he'll die an awful death, leaving out many details about it. All Might then states, "I don't want to show up and tell our son that I'm his father, just for me to die, causing grief. It wouldn't be right. He would be happier if he never knew the truth, and you'd be better off not seeing it." Inku begins to sputter, not understanding why he has to stay away, and why it seems like he doesn't care about her or his son, and doesn't want anything to do with them. All Might replies, "I do care. I just can't be with you. I know you don't understand, but just trust me, this is for the best." Inku sternly responds, "Okay, fine. If that's how you feel, then I won't push it. Apparently you never wanted to have a child, and be a father, or a husband. At least not with me. I guess that was some little thing for fun, huh?" Inku then hangs up and cries, feeling incredibly alone. All Might thinks about calling her back, and knows it would just make things worse, and decides to leave it where it is, and to continue being the symbol of peace for as long as he can, all while beginning a search for a successor. More years pass, and things with Izuku are normal. Nothing in his life changes until one day when he's at school. His teacher mentions that Bakugo and him are both trying to go for UA, which causes everyone in the classroom to make fun of him, and causes Bakugo to yell, "Seriously, Deku? You think a weak little quirkless nerd like you can make it into UA or become a hero? Don't make me laugh." Bakugo then uses a small explosion to knock over Izuku's desk. The teacher quickly scolds Bakugo for doing that, and calms the rest of the class down. After school, before Izuku leaves, Bakugo corners him and starts tormenting him like he did originally, and finishes by burning Izuku's notebook and throws it out the window while saying, "You should just jump off the roof. That's all you're good for. But hell, you'd probably screw that up too." After that, Izuku finds the burnt notebook and takes a shortcut home, feeling depressed and thinking about giving up. But he then thinks of All Might and says to himself, "No, All Might wouldn't give up, which means I shouldn't either. I will be a hero, just like him, and save people with a smile on my face." He then promises to himself that he'll never give up on his dream, and he will be a pro hero, just like All Might, even without a quirk. Then on his way home from school, he passes under a bridge and notices an open manhole, when suddenly a massive amount of sludge jumps out, grabbing onto Izuku, and begins to suffocate him. The villain then says, "Stop struggling! Just give in,
and this'll be so much less painful. But I don't care either way. Your body's mine now.
Izuku continues to struggle, fearing that this is how he'll die, and begins to fall unconscious, but before he does, he sees a large silhouette appear, and he hears a voice yell,
I am here!
But passes out right before the villain is knocked out by a powerful shockwave from a punch. The man who saved Izuku is none other than his own father, All Might himself. All Might carries Izuku and puts him gently on the ground, and notices that he seems familiar. All Might decides to look through Izuku's notebook and reads the name on it, and realizes that he just saved his son's life. All Might thinks about leaving, but doesn't, despite him not having much time left in his buff form. He chooses to sit down and wait for Izuku to wake up so he can finally meet and speak to his son for the first time ever. Luckily, All Might won't have to wait very long to do so. Izuku wakes up dazed and confused, trying to remember what happened when he sees All Might and begins to fanboy out while also thanking him for saving his life. All Might then says,
Ha ha! No thanks necessary, young man. After all, it's what heroes do.
Izuku replies, oh, so cool. Oh yeah, All Might, can you please sign my notebook? I'm a huge fan and I'd really appreciate it if you did. All Might says,
Sure.
And takes the notebook and pen.
What's your name, young man?
Izuku replies, I'm Izuku Midoriya. All Might signs Izuku's notebook and hands it back to him, saying,
Young Midoriya, it is a pleasure to meet you, and I'm happy you look up to me. You seem very bright. I can tell from your notebook that you're quite smart, and think highly of heroes. Your parents must be very proud of you.
Before All Might could continue talking to Izuku, he felt that he was about to reach his limit, and quickly turns around and says farewell to Izuku, then jumps away. As All Might is traveling through the air, he notices that something doesn't feel quite right when he looks down. He notices Izuku latching onto his leg and begins to panic, but doesn't try to push him off, knowing that he'll fall. So, All Might heads to a nearby roof to land. After landing, All Might gives a much harsher lecture to Izuku for doing it. All Might,
what were you thinking? Doing something like that was stupid. You could have died. Explain yourself, young man.
Izuku, taken aback by this, apologizes and begins to tell All Might how he wants to be a hero, and asks him if he can ever be one without a quirk. During this, All Might reverts to his weak form, which shocks Izuku, and All Might begins to explain his injury and his limitation to do hero work. Then, with a heavy heart, All Might says to Izuku, Young Midoriya, you clearly have a good heart, but unfortunately, it is impossible to be a hero without a quirk. It's too dangerous for most people to be pros, but for someone without a quirk, it's a death sentence. This shatters Izuku and breaks his heart. All Might is about to say something else, but before he can, him and Izuku hear a massive explosion nearby, and they both run off of the roof to see what's happening. After some running, All Might and Izuku come across a large crowd of people watching heroes trying to fight the sludge villain to no avail, and contain a fire as well. After All Might and Izuku push through the crowd and see what's going on, they both feel an immense amount of guilt, and both of them feel helpless to do anything. Izuku and All Might continue to stand there motionless as all the heroes back out, until Izuku sees that it's Bakugo who's being attacked by the sludge villain, and instantly runs out to save him. And as Izuku does this, he begins to feel small bursts of energy coursing through his body, increasing his speed, causing him to run faster than normal, and when he throws his bag at the sludge villain, it has more power behind it, but not by any serious amount, and starts trying to get Bakugo out of the sludge, which he's able to do a little better, but it still won't work. As All Might stands there, watching his son trying to do something that the pros were scared to do, he feels guilt for not acting the same and powers up to his buff form and jumps in to defeat the villain with a punch so strong that it changes the weather. After the villain is captured, All Might leaves as fast as he can before he goes back to his weak form, and while Bakugo gets praise from some of the pros, Izuku gets scolded for acting so recklessly. Then, when a paramedic asks Izuku if he's okay, he mentions that he felt a strange feeling building up in his body, making him run faster and have more strength. But the paramedic replies, "Oh, that was probably just your nerves or adrenaline going crazy. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about, but let your parents know about it so they can take you to the doctors if needed." Izuku is then given permission to leave and heads back home. On his way home, Izuku is stopped by Bakugo, who says,
"Listen here, you damn nerd. I don't need your help. Got it? I was just fine without you getting in my way."
Bakugo then walks away and Izuku walks in the other direction. He gets stopped by All Might in his weak form. Before Izuku can say anything, All Might says,
Izuku, I wanted to thank you for running in to save your friend. Seeing you do that inspired me to go beyond my limits and help when I was scared to do so.
Izuku replies, "No, you really shouldn't thank me. I did something irresponsible by rushing in like that. I couldn't do anything because I'm quirkless. I really can't be a hero and save people without one." All Might responds,
No, I was wrong. You inspired me to do more than I thought I could have, and that's something a hero can do.
All Might continues,
Not only that, but one thing that many heroes have in common is that their bodies move automatically to save those in need. Young Midoriya, I'm sorry for being so weak and foolish. I truly believe that you too can become a great hero, just like me.
Izuku falls to the ground crying from pure joy of hearing his idol say that he could be a hero. All Might then says,
Izuku, there are many truths you should know, and I will tell you them soon. But first, I want you to know that I have chosen you to be my successor, and to be the one to inherit my power. I want to give you my quirk.
Izuku, confused, looks up teary-eyed with a dumbfounded expression and replies, "Oh, wait. What the hell are you talking about?" Today we'll be returning to a What If series called What If All Might Was Deku's Dad, and continuing the story that we set up in the first part. Speaking of which, if you haven't seen part 1 of this series, then go and check it out. It should be easy to find, so please check it out so you understand everything that's going on. Now for a quick recap, in the last part, we saw how All Might and Izuku's mom, Inko, meet and saw their relationship grow. Over time, All Might distanced himself from Inko and eventually his son, fearing All for One would harm them, and after Sir Night-Eye's vision of the future is revealed, All Might completely breaks off contact. But All Might, after years, meets his son Izuku in person for the first time, just like in canon, and witnesses Izuku trying to save Bakugo during the Slug Villain incident. We join back just after the Slug Villain incident when All Might offers One for All to Izuku. Izuku looks up with a confused expression and says, "Wait, what the hell are you talking about?" All Might is caught off guard by this, but starts to explain that his quirk is named One for All and that it can be passed from person to person. Izuku then asks, How can you pass on a quirk? That doesn't make any sense. It should be impossible to do that." Izuku then starts muttering word after word, trying to comprehend a quirk that can be passed down when All Might interrupts.
Look, kid. Calm down. I know this is unexpected, but you're just acting weird.
Izuku takes a deep breath and relaxes as All Might finishes his explanation of One for All. When Izuku asks, "Okay, but why do you want to give me your quirk? I mean, am I worthy to inherit your power? It seems so important. I'm not sure I can handle it." All Might replies,
I want to give you my quirk because you have the heart of a hero, and I think that you can handle it. However, there are a few other reasons, but let's go somewhere else to talk about it, and I know just the place.
All Might starts to walk with Izuku, hesitantly following him. After walking for a bit, they arrive at Izuku's apartment complex, where Izuku stops, saying that this is where he lives, and asks All Might why he wanted to come here. All Might responds,
To answer your questions and to see your mom again. We know each other.
Izuku is completely surprised by this, and starts asking a lot more questions. But All Might brushes them off until they get to Izuku's apartment, where he unlocks the door and lets All Might in. As Izuku and All Might are walking through the door, Inko is in the kitchen not hearing or noticing them until Izuku stands in the living room ready to introduce All Might and says, "Hey Mom!" Inko, startled, jumps a little and while still facing away from them says, "Oh! Izuku, I didn't hear you come in!" Inko turns around and sees Izuku standing in the living room with a skinny, sickly-looking man and asks, "I didn't know we had company. Who is this, Izuku?" Before Izuku can say anything, All Might buffs up saying,
It is me here with some great news and an
All Might goes back to his weak form, coughing up blood, and Izuku helping him to sit on the couch as Inko stands there with a blank face. When she asks, Toshinori, is that you?" Inko then gets a frustrated look on her face and continues, "I thought you didn't want anything to do with us anymore. What changed your mind all of a sudden?" Izuku looks at his mom confused as All Might replies,
"A lot, as you can tell. I know I can't ever make it up to you, but I'm sorry for everything."
After that, Inko looks at All Might and gets slightly concerned, asking him if he's okay and what happened. But Izuku interrupts. "Hold on! Mom, what did you mean when you said, 'I thought you didn't want anything to do with us anymore'? And how do you two know each other?" Inko looks at All Might, asking him if he didn't tell Izuku about their past yet, which he nods his head for yes. Inko then says, "Izuku, honey, I know Toshinori, or, All Might, from back when we dated. We were really close, and then one day I found out I was pregnant with you." Izuku's eyes widened, and he asks, "Wait, but if you two were dating during that time, does that mean you cheated on All Might?" Inko, flustered, says, "What? No, that's not it at all. Izuku, the truth is that All Might is your real father, not Hisashi." Izuku's face goes from surprised to shocked as he starts sputtering and freaking out. Inko is able to calm him down and explains how her and All Might met. After Inko does, Izuku asks why All Might wasn't around and why Hisashi pretended to be his father. That's when All Might answers his questions and starts to explain everything.
"You see, Izuku, back before you were born, me and your mom dated. We kept our relationship a secret because of a powerful villain. The same one who gave me this injury."
All Might lifts up his shirt showing the injury to Inko.
"And I was scared of him hurting your mom. But when I found out that you were coming, I decided to stay out of your lives to keep you both safe. And Inko asked Hisashi to help by pretending to be your husband and your father. And after I defeated the villain, I still had to stay away."
Izuku then asks, "But if you defeated the villain, then why stay away? Does it have something to do with your injury?" All Might replies,
Kind of. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about you meeting me like this, and your mom seeing me looking like a literal skeleton. But that's not the main reason."
Inko butts in saying, "According to what you told me, your sidekick Sir Night-Eye looked into the future where he saw you die, and you didn't want to show up to just pass away. Looks like you don't have a problem with doing that now." And Inko glares at All Might, waiting for him to respond. Okay, so before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive is a channel based on a variety of anime lore. If you're interested in content like this, make sure you click the icon on the top right corner, or check the description below for a link to the channel. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. After a few minutes of silence, All Might takes a deep breath and replies,
"That's not entirely it either. You see, Night-Eye saw me die a horrible death at the hands of a villain. But he also saw 2 other people die. In the future, he saw I came back into your lives, and we were a family, but that also put you both in danger. The villain took your lives right before he took mine. And according to Night-Eye, your deaths were worse than mine."
Inko and Izuku go pale hearing the future that Night-Eye saw. As Izuku sits down on a chair trying to process what he just heard, Inko goes into a tirade yelling at All Might. "Are you serious? Something that bad happens to us? Why are you here then? Are you saying you don't care if that happens to us now?" Inko continues to berate All Might when he finally says,
"Inko, please! Don't worry. I care about you and our son more than anything. It's why I stayed away for so long, but the reason why I'm back now is because I think I've already changed the future, or can change it at least."
Inko and Izuku look at All Might with curious looks as he continues to explain.
"You see, when Night-Eye looked into the future, he saw events that have never happened, including me giving my quirk to someone. That was supposed to happen about a year ago. I didn't know who I was supposed to give it to, but I knew it wasn't Izuku. That's one of the reasons why I want to give him one for all to undoubtedly change the future."
Surprised, Inko looks at All Might and asks, "Wait, you want to give our son one for all to change the future?" All Might answers,
"Yes, but I also want to give him my quirk because he reminds me so much of myself back when I was quirkless. He wants to help people no matter what. Our son is exactly like me,
We're so similar, and I want to give him the same chance I was given to be a truly great hero, like I know he can be.
This helps to calm Inko and Izuku down. All Might then puts his hand out saying,
Izuku, Inko, I'm sorry for not being in your lives until now, but please, let me have a chance to be there for you both now. If you'll have me, that is.
After All Might says this, Inko and Izuku look at each other, and Inko says that she's fine with All Might being around if Izuku is. All Might then looks at Izuku and puts his hand out, which Izuku shakes while smiling and saying, I wish you were here while I was growing up, but I'm happy to have you here now, and I'd be honored to be your successor, for 2 reasons now. All Might smiles and hugs Izuku, and Inko starts to tear up. But during this, Izuku remembers that during the Slug Villain incident, a strange feeling was building up in his body, making him move faster and have more strength, and tells his mom and All Might about it. Once Izuku explains the strange feeling, Inko and All Might both look at each other, agreeing that it's quite strange for something like that to happen, and decide to take Izuku to the doctors tomorrow for a checkup. The next day, Inko and All Might take Izuku to the doctors, where a few tests are done, and after a couple of hours, the doctor and Izuku return to the office, where his mom and All Might were waiting for the results. As the doctor sits down, he says, Okay, so I looked over Izuku, and congratulations are in order. It seems he's finally awoken his quirk. Inko and All Might are surprised by this, and ask what his quirk is. The doctor replies, Well, it appears to be a weak enhancement quirk. It seems to only increase his physical abilities like strength, speed, and durability with a boost of, at most, 0.5 times. It doesn't seem like much, but considering his quirk hasn't had time to fully develop, I think it can grow much stronger with proper training. After a short conversation, Izuku and his parents leave the doctors and spend the rest of the day either celebrating Izuku's new quirk, or trying to come up with ideas on how to train his quirk and body to inherit One for All. The next day, All Might takes Izuku to a beach full of trash and explains that this is where he'll be training his quirk and improve his physical strength so he can inherit One for All, while also giving him a schedule to help ensure that his growth will be swift and effective, officially starting Izuku's 10 months of training for the UA entrance exam. During this time, Izuku grows by leaps and bounds, increasing not only his overall physical condition, but his quirk as well. But a big change from what happened in canon is the fact that Izuku doesn't overexert himself thanks to All Might being around much more often to help guide him. This helps more due to the fact that All Might is short of living with him, and Inko during the training allowing All Might to bond with his son and teach him more about One for All. But this also gives All Might a chance to reconnect with Inko. Though they're not totally back together, but they are getting along decently well. Also, due to All Might being around so much and actually spending time with Izuku and Inko out in public, they come up with a story of why this man is around so much and start telling everyone that he's Izuku's stepdad and new husband, which works. However, Bakugo and a few others start to pick on Izuku about this when they find out, because, well, how All Might looks in his weak form, but other than that, nothing really happens. After about 9 months have passed, Izuku finally clears the entire beach of trash, completing his training, and All Might passes on One for All to him. The last month is used to train Izuku on how to use One for All, which is much easier due to Izuku having more knowledge about it, allowing him to control it slightly easier, but his quirk, which is named Spartan Boost, also makes it easier for him to call upon One for All and transfer the power from one part of his body to another much faster with less concentration. Like in the series, Izuku can use 5% of One for All off the bat, but with his quirk he's able to increase his durability, so he can use more power, and with all his training, he's increased his multiplier from 0.5 to 2, meaning he can use 10% of One for All without hurting himself, and even go a little higher in short bursts. During the last month, Izuku does combat training with All Might and actually increases his limit from 10% to 11%, and he has also started working on flowing One for All throughout his whole body, though he's only practiced that for the last few days. But his control is far better than it was in canon by this time, and he is far more ready for the UA entrance exam. On the day of UA's entrance exam, as Izuku is walking into the lecture hall, Bakugo, who is walking behind him, starts to berate and insult him.
Deku, you damned nerd! What are you doing here? Are you looking to kill yourself or something? Make sure you don't get in my way, or I'll crush you, you got it?
But thanks to All Might's added influence, Izuku has grown to be less nervous and knows it's better to ignore Bakugo, which he does as he continues to walk.
which frustrates Bakugo enough to shoulder check Izuku, almost making him trip, but he activates One For All 2% to quickly place a leg in front of him and regain his balance, which Bakugo sees and comments.
I heard a rumor you got a quirk, but I don't see it. You've just been training. You might as well go home. You're not getting into UA without a quirk.
And with that, Bakugo leaves with Izuku standing there. After a second of standing there, a girl named Uraraka walks up to Izuku saying,
Hey, I saw how you kept yourself from falling. That was kind of cool. You have good reflexes. What was that spiky hair guy's problem trying to knock you over? That wasn't nice. I hope you know not everyone here is like that. At least not me.
Izuku, who is still nervous to talk to girls, just keeps nodding his head for yes until the girl walks away into the lecture hall, with Izuku following not long after. In the lecture hall, President Mike explains the rules of the practical exam, like he does in canon, and everything else is pretty much the same until at Izuku's test site when the exam begins. Unlike what happened originally, Izuku isn't left behind. In fact, he's one of the first to make it through the gate. As soon as he does, using only 7% of One For All, Izuku takes out 3 one-point robots immediately, and continues to run around taking out a large amount of robots during the majority of the exam. But when the 0-point bot appears and everyone starts to run away, Izuku sees Uraraka trapped under a large piece of rubble as the 0-point bot is moving closer, and Izuku instantly powers up to 11% of One For All, making it to Uraraka in no time, and easily lifts the rubble off of her and quickly gets her away from the robot. But right after he does this, the exam ends, and Recovery Girl arrives to help anyone who's injured. Once Uraraka gets healed, she thanks Izuku, and they go their separate ways, with Izuku feeling much more pleased with his performance this time around. About a week passes before a letter from UA arrives, but in the meantime, All Might is around, and while he does not know the outcome of the exam, he does keep it hidden until Izuku's acceptance letter to UA arrives. Instead of a hologram All Might telling Izuku that he got in, he's told by All Might in person right when he walks through the door with the letter. All Might also mentions that he's the newest faculty member at UA, which surprises Izuku and Inko. But All Might then tells his son that he's immensely proud of him for not only passing, but for getting the highest score out of anyone with 67 villain points and 25 rescue points for a total of 92 points. Izuku is blown away that he got the highest score, and Inko hugs Izuku, congratulating him. But All Might then states, "Now Izuku, this is only your first step to becoming a hero. Don't let your overwhelming success give you a big ego. There's still something left for you to learn. Understand?" Izuku smiles and nods his head in agreement, promising to keep working hard no matter what, which makes All Might smile, when he suddenly remembers something important and says, "Oh, by the way, Izuku, you know that girl you told us about? The one you met before the exam and saved during it? Well, I heard her name was Ochako Uraraka, and she passed the entrance exam as well. She'll also be in the same class as yours, too. I figured you'd love to know that you'll get to see her again, considering you talked about her so much." Izuku gets incredibly embarrassed and flustered by All Might's statement, and tries to act like he has no idea what his father is talking about, but he's doing a very poor job of that. All Might just laughs and hugs his son, after which the two of them start getting everything ready for the first day at UA, including coming up with ideas for Izuku's hero costume. Okay, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there's a few more things that I'd like to go over before it ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that's in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So, thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have an amazing day.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through.
Day of UA, as he is running through the halls looking for his class when he finally comes across classroom 1A. When he opens the door, he sees Bakugo and a student named Ida arguing with one another. After a couple of seconds, Bakugo notices Izuku and jumps up from his chair shouting, "Deku, you damn nerd! Not only did you have the nerve to join UA, but you also have the nerve to beat me? How's that even possible? You must have cheated! Tell me, you quirkless loser!" Everyone in the classroom looks at Izuku, realizing he's the one who got the highest score in the practice exams. But are confused due to Bakugo saying he's quirkless. Izuku replies, I was a late bloomer. You know that, Kachan. I do have a quirk. It just took a while to appear. After hearing Izuku's reply, the class isn't confused, but are surprised that he was a late bloomer. Bakugo, though, is clearly angered by this and gets ready to blow Izuku up, but before he can, Ida walks up to Izuku and introduces himself. Hello, I'm Tenya Ida. It's a pleasure to meet you. I saw your fight during the practical exams, and I'm proud to be a fellow student alongside someone like you. Izuku awkwardly thanks Ida for regarding him so highly and tries to introduce himself when Uraraka walks up behind him, happily saying, It's you! I was hoping I would see you again. I can't thank you enough for saving me during the exam. I owe you one. Izuku blushes and nervously tells Uraraka that it was no trouble at all and that it was the right thing to do. They then have a very short conversation with Izuku, being nervous for most of it, when a man in a sleeping bag shows up and interrupts them by saying, If you're here to make friends, then I suggest you leave. Once everyone stops talking and looks at the man, he stands up and introduces himself. It took you all way too long to quiet down. This won't work. That's how you're going to be. I'm Shota Aizawa, but call me Mr. Aizawa. I'm your teacher. Everyone in the class is a little surprised, but Mr. Aizawa ignores them all and pulls up a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag and tells them all, Put these on and head outside. We got something important to do. Everyone leaves the classroom, and once they get changed into their gym outfits, and heads outside, where Mr. Aizawa informs them that they all would be doing a quirk assessment test. The class is a little confused by this. Uraraka mentions that they'll miss orientation, but Aizawa replies, If you really want to make the big leagues, then you can't waste your time on pointless ceremonies. Here at UA, we aren't tethered to traditions, which allow me to run this class however I want. Mr. Aizawa continues, You've been taking standardized tests for as long as you've been in school, but today, you get to use your quirks for a physical exam. Aizawa then asks Izuku, since he got the highest score in the practical exam, to throw the ball using his quirk, which he does, getting about 197.5 meters, using 11% of one for all throughout his whole arm, showing that he does in fact have a quirk, which infuriates Bakugo. But the class, after seeing it, get excited that they can use their quirks when Aizawa snaps at them. So you think it's going to be fun? You only have 3 years here to become a hero. It's not all going to be fun and games. Today you'll compete in 8 physical tests to gauge your overall potential, and whoever comes in last will be expelled immediately. Everyone is shocked when they hear this, and Uraraka protests, stating that it's not fair for Aizawa to do that, with Izuku backing her up slightly. But Mr. Aizawa replies, I told you I get to run this class however I want, and if any of you have a problem with it, then you can just leave. This is to see if you're cut out to be here. UA will throw multiple hardships at you, and the world will be even worse when you're a pro. This test is nothing. Show me it's no mistake that you're here, and go beyond plus ultra style. After a few seconds of thinking, the whole class gets determined looks on their faces, and Aizawa in response smiles, saying, Okay, let's get started. And with that, the quirk assessment test begins, starting with a 50-meter dash. No scores really change except for Izuku, who gets time of 3.9 seconds, and as you can guess, every other score for Izuku will be much better than it was originally, except for the ball throw because he only used 11%. But other than that, there's no reason to really focus too much on the test, and in the end, Izuku ends up getting the 6th highest score. Thanks to his quirk Spartan Boost and One for All, increasing all of his physical abilities to the point where even if he didn't have an insane score, he was still able to get a pretty decent overall score. And it does help that Izuku used a little of Full Call during certain tests like sit-ups and went up to 12% and 13% for short periods, so he did very well. Also, as a reminder, Izuku's quirk Spartan Boost increases his body's ability like speed, strength, durability, etc. by 2 times as of now, which helps him to handle more One for All. Without using it, Izuku can only use a little over 5%, and it also helps him to add extra power for short periods of time, and it makes it easier for him to move the power throughout and to different parts of his body. But he can use Spartan Boost on its own, just like he can use One for All by itself. But let's move on. Naturally, because Izuku's score, a lot of the students would move down by 1 spot, meaning Mineta is last. But Aizawa doesn't expel him or anyone else because he does see potential in all of them and tells them that it was a logical deception to make them try harder. However, Aizawa does mention that if any of them step out of line or show signs of not being cut out for UA, then he won't hesitate to expel them. He then ends the class and walks away, but he runs into All Might and has a conversation with him, though it's pretty normal, so it's not very important. At the end of the first day of UA, Izuku is walking out of the main building when Ida and Uraraka both catch up to him and properly introduce themselves to one another. And as they all walk to the station together, Ida asks, "Izuku, if you don't mind me asking, what's with Bakugo and his attitude towards you? It seemed like he was ready to attack you at any moment." Izuku replies, "Well, remember when I said I was a late bloomer with my quirk? It's probably that combined with the fact that he thinks I'm a loser, which is why he calls me Deku. He hates that it seems like I'm trying to show him up. He's very competitive." Uraraka replies, "It seems like he's full of himself, but I can't believe you got your quirk late. That's crazy. You're already so strong. And I have to admit, I like that name. Deku, it'd be a great hero name. Plus, it's kinda cute." Izuku, blushing, responds, "Well, I don't know about that, but if you want to call me Deku." Ida interjects, asking why Izuku is okay with Uraraka calling him that if it's an insult, which isn't really answered, and the three new friends head to the station, ending the first day of UA. Nothing really important happens, so we'll skip to the next day, the day of the combat training, but first... The day starts pretty uneventful, but when the bell rings, All Might enters the classroom like a hero, and everyone in the class is excited except Izuku, who is thinking to himself, "Come on, Dad! You don't have much time to stop showboating." Once All Might gets to the small podium, he announces that they'll be doing combat practice and tells everyone to get changed into their hero costumes, which everyone is happy to do as they all leave for the locker room to get changed. Outside at Ground Beta, everyone arrives wearing their hero costumes, which are all pretty much the same, except for Izuku's, whose costume looks less homemade, more like an in-between version of his first and his second costume. The only things that are missing are the weird bunny ear mask and the other little face mask. He doesn't have these this time around. All Might shot it down. Once everyone has settled down, All Might explains the rules for the exercise and splits everyone up into teams of 2, randomly picking their matchups, which are all exactly the same as in canon, with the first match being Izuku and Uraraka as the heroes against Team Bakugo and Ida as the villains. Right before the match starts, Izuku and Uraraka stand outside of the building trying to come up with a plan when Uraraka notices that Izuku seems a little nervous and asks him what's wrong. Izuku answers, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. I'm just thinking, we need to be cautious of our opponents, especially Bakugo. I've known him ever since we were kids, and he's incredible when it comes to things like this. Even though he's a bit of a jerk, but that just means I have to be better. I refuse to lose this, not to him. This time I'm winning!" Uraraka smiles and replies, "I see, so you're planning on putting your foot down to finally face and beat your lifelong rival. That's so cool." Izuku blushes and continues to talk about the plan with Uraraka. Now, one thing I would like to add to keep in mind that Izuku isn't overall nervous thanks to All Might extra influence, but he's still Izuku. Nothing we can do about that. After a minute goes by, the combat exercise officially starts, and once it does, Izuku and Uraraka sneak through a window and move around the building, with Izuku having Spartan Boost activate while doing so. When suddenly Bakugo jumps out from around a corner and uses Explosion, but Izuku uses 11% of One For All in his legs to get him and Uraraka out of the way before they get hit by the attack. And when Kacchan sees this, he yells, "You damn nerd! Stop being a coward and face me! Head on!" Bakugo rushes forward and throws a big right hook, but Izuku grabs his arm, using a 2x boost to his strength, throws Bakugo over his shoulder, and slams him into the ground hard, knocking the wind right out of him. Bakugo, taking some time to get up from the throw, turns to Deku and asks, "What the hell was that? How's a weakling like you able to do that?" Izuku answers, "Because I've studied you, and I know you always start fighting with a right hook. I'm not a weakling anymore, Kacchan. I'll fight you head on and win. Do you hear me? From this point on, I won't let you walk all over me. Deku is now the name of a hero, not a loser." Uraraka looks at Izuku, smiling, giving him a thumbs up when Izuku tells her to go ahead without him, which she does, and once Bakugo fully gets back up on his feet, he glares at Izuku and yells, "Ever since your stupid stepdad and a
Quirk came along, you've been acting so confident. I'm gonna show you that means nothing. I'll obliterate you! After saying this, Bakugo charges forward, firing explosions after explosions, shaking the whole building, while Izuku uses 11% in his legs to dodge all of them. Bakugo then fires a massive blast from one of his gauntlets, nearly destroying an entire floor of the building, but it does knock Izuku into a wall, hurting him slightly. As Deku is getting back up, Bakugo leaps forward using explosions to keep up his speed, and punches him in the gut to deliver a punch to Bakugo square in the face, knocking him away. But Izuku counters by using 11% in his arm to deliver a punch to Bakugo square in the face, knocking him away. After they both stare each other down while catching their breaths, but the silence is broken when Bakugo screams, "You think you're so damn great, don't you? A minute, you've always looked down at me, like I was some weakling. And now that you have a quirk, I bet you're excited to finally show me up, aren't you?" Izuku looks at Bakugo confused and replies, "What? No, I don't look down on you whatsoever, Kachan. Even after how you treated me, I've always done nothing but look up to you. All I wanted to do is show you that I'm not weak and beat you." Deku looks at Bakugo with an intensely serious on his face, taking his opponent aback before Kachan replies, "Okay, fine. Then don't hold back, or I'll kill you." Bakugo then uses a special move called Flash Grenade, blinding Izuku, and uses an explosion to move in close to attack, but Izuku activates Full Call at 11%, barely dodging an explosion, and counters by punching Bakugo, forcing him back slightly. But Kachan launches a double explosion that hits Izuku and sends him flying towards a wall. Before he hits it, Deku manages to plant his feet on the wall and jumps forward back at Bakugo, landing a powerful left hook. Immediately after, Kachan grabs Izuku's arm and uses an explosion to pick up speed, spins around and slams Izuku on the ground, where Bakugo then sets a large explosion, sending Deku flying through a damaged wall. While Izuku struggles to get back to his feet, Bakugo begins to taunt him, saying, "What's the matter? I thought you wanted to prove how strong you are. Or did I mishear you? It's clear you're still nothing but a pathetic loser, and I'm getting sick of you wasting my time." Izuku smirks and powers up Full Call at 13% and moves forward. Bakugo tries to counter with an explosion, but Izuku narrowly sidesteps the blast and hits with a devastating uppercut, sending Kachan up, slamming into the ceiling, where he falls back down and uses an explosion to try to force Izuku back, which hits and knocks him a short distance away. Bakugo then blasts himself forward to try to deal a finishing left hook, but Izuku catches his arm again and spins him around multiple times, picking up more momentum and throws Kachan through a damaged wall. Deku then moves in and deals a gut punch, sending Bakugo through another damaged wall, finally knocking him out. Izuku stops using Full Call and sits down on the floor, exhausted, and while looking at Bakugo says to himself, "I actually knocked you out. Wow, I can't believe it. Oh, you're gonna be so pissed when you wake up." Izuku, after a minute of resting, gets up and uses some capture tape to secure Kachan. After he does, Izuku heads off, remarking how long the fight took, and tries to get a hold of Uraraka but isn't able to. When he eventually finds the fake bomb and Ida, he realizes Uraraka was captured. Deku powers up his legs to 11% and rushes forward, but before he can actually do anything, a buzzer goes off with All Might yelling over the loudspeaker, "Time's up! And the heroes have failed to capture the bomb, so the villains win." This quickly stops Izuku in his tracks as he looks down in disappointment, while Ida gloats, still overacting like a villain. After a second goes by, Deku walks over to Uraraka and helps her get out of the capture tape, where she begins to apologize. "Sorry for getting captured, Deku. I wish I could have done more, but Ida was too fast, and I really couldn't keep up. Especially when he went on the offensive." Izuku replies, "It's fine. He's a tough opponent. I know most would have trouble against him." Ida then says in an over-dramatic villain voice, "That is correct, pathetic heroes, for I am the true embodiment of evil, and all should fear me." Izuku and Uraraka look at Ida and start laughing at how serious he's trying to act, causing him to finally stop. They all leave the training area and meet back with the class, while Bakugo is taken to infirmary to get patched up. Ida is named the MVP because he was able to capture Uraraka and keep the bomb safe, while everyone else mistakes are pretty obvious, like Bakugo and Izuku causing damage to the building, which Momo does point out. Overall, through every other match after Izuku is fairly standard with nothing major happening, so let's skip ahead to when Bakugo wakes up in the infirmary, with Buff Almighty standing over over him. Bakugo asks what happened, and All Might explains that he was knocked out during the fight with Izuku. But thanks him for prolonging the fight, his team was able to win. Kacchan looks at All Might with an intense look of anger and jumps out of the bed shouting, "No, this isn't over! Not by a long shot!" and runs out of the room, where All Might immediately goes back to his weak form, coughing up blood as he says to himself, that young man sure has a temper. Hopefully he doesn't do something stupid. Maybe I should give Aizawa a heads up. Meanwhile, over in Class 1A, everyone is complimenting Izuku's performance during the exercise. Thanks to Deku having so much control and actually knocking out Bakugo, he's pretty much impressed everyone, but after a few minutes, Bakugo storms through the door shouting, "Deku, I have a bone to pick with you!" and moves towards Izuku when a few students like Ida, Uraraka, and Kirishima try to stop and calm him down, but he just pushes past them and slams his hands on Izuku's desk, yelling, "Deku, know that I don't accept this so-called win. It doesn't count unless I take you down myself. But don't think you're some badass because you knocked me out. I was holding back, so I didn't collapse the whole building on top of us. Next time it'll be a proper fight, got it?" Izuku looks at Bakugo and smiling says, "Sure, but I won't lose. Expect me to be even stronger when we have our rematch." Bakugo yells back in a response, "Don't even dream of beating me, you damn nerd. I'll send you straight to hell. There's no way you'll surpass me, not in a billion years." And with that, Bakugo storms out of the class with his bag and heads home. While everyone asks what that all was about, and Deku replies, "Just Bakugo being Bakugo. Believe it or not, that was probably the nicest conversation we've had in years." Izuku laughs a little along with a few of the other students, which is when Uraraka smiles at Deku and compliments him on how cool he is before heading off as well, leaving Izuku blushing profusely as everyone else eventually heads home with Izuku being the last. We continue on the day after the combat exercise with Izuku as he walks to UA. After turning the corner, he notices a massive crowd of reporters in front of UA's gate, trying to get interviews with students and teachers. Izuku walks through the crowd trying to get to the gate when a reporter stops him and asks what it's like to have All Might as a teacher. And he answers slightly nervous, he's really cool. It's an honor to be taught by him. I'd like to talk more, but I should be on my way. Can't be late for classes." Izuku quickly turns away from the reporters and walks through the gate into the main building, after which the reporters stop more students of Class 1A and ask them questions about All Might. Eventually, Aizawa walks out to the gate where a reporter asks him if he can please get All Might so they can get an interview, but he simply replies, "All Might isn't on campus today. Now leave. You've already disturbed my students enough." Aizawa, turning around, walks away from the crowd as they get frustrated by his response. One of the reporters tries to walk through the gate but accidentally activates UA's barrier in doing so. This is happening all while an unknown figure watches and schemes. Later, after the bell rings, Mr. Aizawa congratulates all the students for the decent job during the combat training yesterday and gives out some pointers, but once he finishes his small lecture, Aizawa announces, "Now let's get down to business. Our first task today will decide your future." Hearing this, the class gets concerned that it's another test when their teacher tells them, "You all need to pick a class representative." As soon as Aizawa says this, the class is relieved to finally be doing normal school stuff. Though it does get a little hectic when most everyone says they want to be clap rep, things do calm down when Ida suggests that they vote on who the class rep should be, which all the students agree to. Aizawa goes along with it, provided that they can get it done before his nap is over. After some time, everyone votes and Izuku is elected to be rep, receiving 5 votes, 3 being from himself, Ida, and Uraraka, with the other 2 votes being from Kirishima and Sui, who have grown a decent amount of respect for Izuku, and Momo is the deputy getting 2 votes. Everyone is generally okay with this, including Ida, though he's a little disappointed that he got 0 votes, and Bakugo is of course pissed with the results. Not long after the election, Class 1A heads to the cafeteria for lunch where Izuku, Ida, and Uraraka sit together, but are also joined by Kirishima and Sue, who join in on their conversation. During this time, Izuku admits that he worried about not being a good fit for class rep, but Uraraka tells him that he'll do great, and Ida says, "Nonsense. You're clearly the best choice for the job. Your courage and quick thinking under pressure will make you a worthy leader, not to mention the strength that you've shown. That's at least all the reason why I voted for you. Izuku is a little surprised that Ida voted for him, but before he could reply, Kirishima butts in. That's pretty much the same reason why I voted for you. The way you handled yourself in that fight against Bakugo was epic and super manly. Sui then adds, not to mention you're humble and respectable. I'd much rather have a class rep like you than, say, someone like Bakugo. Izuku is a little lost for words and doesn't really know how to react, and just thanks them all for believing in him. After Uraraka asks, hey Ida, didn't you really want to be rep? I mean, you look the part because of the glasses. Why not vote for yourself? Ida responds, well, wanting a job and being suited for it are quite different things. Observing the Ida Family Hero Agency has taught me that much. This catches everyone's attention and they start asking Ida about this agency, which he tries to brush off until they finally break him, and Ida tells them that his family have been heroes for multiple generations and mentions that his brother is Ignium, which blows everyone away, especially Izuku, who fanboys out a little. Ida then says, Ignium is an unmatched commander who honors the hero code. As the second oldest Ida son, I strive to be just like him. However, I'm not ready to be in a real leadership role like you, Izuku. Deku replies telling Ida that he thinks that he would be a great leader if given the chance, which makes Ida feel better, and Uraraka says that it's nice to see Ida smile instead of being all serious and he should do it more often, which makes everyone at the table laugh a little. But the moment is cut short when a level 3 security breach alarm suddenly goes off. Ida asks the third year what the alarm is for, and he tells him that it means someone has gotten past the school barrier and that they need to evacuate immediately. Ida, along with everyone else at their table, leaves and heads out into the hallway where they get caught up in the panic and the stamping crowd, which quickly separates everyone from each other. Ida slowly makes his way to the window and sees the group of reporters were the ones who set off the alarm. Ida tries to get everyone's attention to tell them that everything is fine, but no one is listening. After a few minutes, he eventually sees Izuku and Uraraka a few feet away, and he makes his way over to them, asking Uraraka to make him float so he can get everyone's attention and let them know what's really going on, which she does. Once Ida is floating above everyone, he gets ready to use his engines to push himself to the exit, but before he can, Izuku floats up with the help of Uraraka and offers to give him a hand or foot. Izuku then uses 11% of his legs and pushes Ida forward to the exit, while pushing himself in the opposite direction. But this does help Ida get to the exit without using his quirk, and he lets everyone know that it was just a press outside managing to calm them all down. Not long after, the police arrive and escort the reporters off the UA's campus, while all the students went on with the rest of their day. Back with Class 1A, as Izuku is getting ready to discuss who the other class officer should be, he tells everyone that he feels Ida should be the class rep because he was able to get control of the earlier situation and calm everyone down easily. With the majority of the class agree, and after a short discussion, Ida accepts the position under a condition that Izuku will also be a deputy, which Mr. Aizawa says it's fine as long as they stop wasting time. The rest of the day goes on with the principal and a few other faculty members inspecting the gate and realize that it was no accident, either being a show of power or declaration of war, but overall the remainder of the day is uneventful and ends fairly calm, but tomorrow will be quite different. The next day starts up with All Might going around the city, taking out villain after villain without using up the entirety of his time. With All Might's time limit only being about 3.5 hours, he is stretching himself thin, but when he gets to the UA, he only needs to rest up for a little while before he can teach the class. Now over with Class 1A, after the bell rings, Mr. Aizawa announces the class will be doing rescue training and will head to an off-campus facility for it. This excites all students and they get ready to head out to the bus, where Ida tries to get everyone in an organized fashion, but it ends up being pointless because of the bus open layout, but ultimately the bus leaves UA without any issues. During the trips, everyone starts talking about their quirks, with Izuku being first, though most of it all just complaints, and the conversations eventually turn Bakugo and Todoroki, where everyone begins to pick on how Bakugo tends to yell and get angry a lot, which of course causes him to shout at everyone. Once Mr. Aizawa tells the class to calm down, it's fairly boring until they get to their destination. When the class steps off the bus, they get greeted by Pro Hero 13, which excites just about everyone, especially Izuka and Uraraka. 13 then asks the class to follow her into the facility. And when they do, everyone is awed by the inside as 13 starts to introduce the facility. A shipwreck, a landslide, a fire, a windstorm, etc. I created this facility to help teach young heroes in training, like yourselves, how to deal with many different types of disasters. I call this place the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, but you can call it USJ for short. After Aizawa walking up to 13 asks her where All Might is, and she tells Eraserhead that All Might overused his quirk and needs to rest, but he'll be able to join them halfway through the rescue exercise. Meanwhile, back at UA, All Might is in the teacher's lounge trying to rest up as best as he can. But back at USJ, 13 starts to explain her quirk and warns how dangerous her quirk, along with all of theirs, can actually be if they use them improperly. Even if it's to do something good, like saving someone, and ensures that they understand how today's exercises are to teach them how to save people's lives, not to hurt or harm, because this is something a pro must know how to do. Once 13 finishes her speech, everyone begins to applaud her, getting pumped up for their exercise, but right as Aizawa gets everyone's attention to start the class, the power begins to fluctuate and eventually shuts down, as a strange shadowy portal starts growing in the middle of the facility. Once the portal grows big enough, a massive number of villains march out of it, confusing everyone as they start asking if this was part of the exercise. Izuku steps forward to get a better look when Aizawa shouts, "Stay back!" He quickly puts on his goggles and continues, "This isn't an exercise. They are real villains. Kaminari, use your quirk to call the campus and inform them on what's going on." Kaminari attempts to contact the students, but isn't able to for some reason. Aizawa then says, "They must have someone who can jam our communications." That's unfortunate. It's clear that they chose this moment to attack for some reason, and planned it out accordingly, so you all know to get out of here now. 13, evacuate the students and call the campus for help when you can. I'll hold these punks off until backup arrives. Izuku yells back at Aizawa in concern. "What? But you can't take them all on! Your quirk is better suited for stealth, or one-on-one fights, not a massive group brawl. It's too dangerous to fight without help." Aizawa then gives a confident smirk and says, "Kid, you can't be a pro if you only have one trick." Aizawa then runs and leaps off the stairs, rushing fast towards the villains as they get ready to use their quirks to deal a swift end, but Aizawa erases their quirk, stopping them, and begins to cut away at the villains' ranks with surprising amount of ease, surprising the whole class as they watch. As the fight continues, Izuku gets slightly distracted by it, but once Ida regains his attention, 13 tries to get everyone out of the facility, but as they run towards the exit, a dark mist instantly forms in front of the exit, blocking anyone from escaping, when a voice rings out from the mist. "Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you all. We're the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we've decided to invite ourselves into a haven of justice to greet you and end the life of All Might. After all, doesn't this seem like the fitting place for the symbol of peace to take his last breath?" Izuku and everyone else are confused and concerned by this statement as the warp villain continues. "I believe All Might was supposed to be here today, and yet I see no sign of him. There must have been a change that we were unable to foresee. Oh well, I suppose it doesn't really matter. I still have my role to play." The Mist villain prepares to attack with 13 doing the same, but Bakugo and Kirishima interfere by jumping in and attacking, which causes a large explosion, but after the smoke clears, it reveals that the villain is unharmed, shocking everyone. 13 orders the two students to get out of the way when the Mist villain says, "You're quite annoying. It would be better if I scattered all of you across the facility to meet my comrades and your deaths." the villain activates his quirk, surrounding well over half the class in a dome of dark mist, and warps them all across the USJ in an instant, leaving only 13 Uraraka, Ida, Soji, Sato, Zero, and Ashido by the exit with the warp villain. Over in the shipwreck zone, Izuku falls out of the portal straight into the water. As he regains his bearings and swims up to the surface, he notices a water villain charging towards him to attack. Izuku activates 11%, readies himself to fight, but Sui quickly knocks out the villain and grabs Izuku with her tongue while swimming away with him and Mineta. Sue, along with her two classmates, go to the fake ship, where they get on board to rest up and talk about what the warping villain said earlier, but not very long after, a large group of random villains surround the ship and prepare to attack the students, making Mineta freak out as Deku thought nervously about how the villains can kill his dad, but only come up with one conclusion, and tells his two allies, "If these villains have a way to kill All Might, then we have to stop them. No one at UA knows what's going on. We can't sit by and let this happen. We have to work together to save All Might, ourselves, and everyone else." As Izuku says this, every member of Class 1A and the Pro 13 and Aizawa are facing their own challenges, trying to figure out ways to handle their current situation. Meanwhile, back at UA in the Teacher's Lounge, All Might attempts to call Aizawa and 13 a few times but is unable to get a hold of them. All Might gets concerned and decides to head off to the USJ. But as he stands up to leave, Principal Nezu walks in and stops him, asking All Might to stay for a quick chat, which he agrees to. And as they both sit down, Nezu pours some tea while saying, "I saw the article this morning. Well done resolving all those incidents. But you know you can't go to everyone who needs help anymore. It's why I gave you this job in the first place, so you could help shape the next generation of heroes." All Might replies, "I know. It's just hard to do that, sir. I don't think I could ever stop helping people, if I can. It's just who I am, I suppose." Nezu then states, "Yes, I understand, but regardless, you need to focus on your new responsibilities as a teacher. You've already done a lot for your son Midoriya, but as the teacher, you need to help the students here to grow just as much as your own son, and you very well can't do that while hiding in the teacher's lounge now, can you?" All Might then sips the tea and says, "Yeah, you're right, sir. I can't neglect my responsibilities to my students, but something tells me it won't be easy to adjust." Nezu responds, "Well then, I suggest you get to working on it right away. If you feel good enough, then why don't you take a stroll to USJ? By the time you get there, the exercise should be halfway over. That's better than missing the entire class now, isn't it?" Agreeing with Principal Nezu, All Might leaves the teacher's lounge and walks to the USJ in his weak form. But meanwhile, back at the USJ, as Mineta is freaking out and yelling that they should wait for the pros, Deku points out that the villains don't seem to know what their quirks are because of Sui being sent to the shipwreck zone with them, giving them the idea to explain their quirks to each other so they can work together more efficiently. After Sue explains hers, Izuku explains his as Spartan Boost, saying that it increases all of his physical abilities, and that at his best can only use 13% of his full power. Mineta then explains his quirk, after proceeding to freak out some more when a massive attack hits the ship, making it start to sink. Mineta panics in response and throws some sticky balls at the villains in the water. Izuku, seeing how the villains react, starts to hatch a plan, and after a few seconds, he tells Mineta and Sue to get ready for an opening, and before they can respond, Deku jumps off the ship. Izuku realizes that he needs to use 100% of One For All to get out of the situation, but he also knows that it will damage his body if he uses it. So, as Izuku falls, he focuses all of his power into his index finger and flicks it, sending an immense amount of wind pressure into the water, creating a whirlpool that starts to suck in all the villains. Once Sui notices the opening, she grabs Mineta and jumps off the ship using her tongue to grab Deku as they pass by. while Mineta, who's inspired by Izuku actions, throws a large amount of sticky balls into the water, causing all the villains to stick together, as they are sucked into the whirlpool, allowing Izuku, Sui, and Mineta to escape. When they get to the edge of the shipwreck zone, Deku looks at his index finger and notices that the bones in it are broken. But he ignores the pain as best as he can and comes up with a plan to sneak around the shore of the shipwreck zone to exit, while him and his small group also check up on Aizawa to see if he needs any help. As Izuku's group moves to where the massive fight is taking place, they witness Eraserhead taking down a handful of cronies easily, but he finishes them off. Aizawa notices the strange man with the hand mask charging towards him and moves forward to take down his foe, but the villain finds an opening and swiftly takes it, grabbing onto Aizawa's elbow and begins to decay it. In reaction, Aizawa kicks the decay villain away and jumps back, trying to recover as he fights off more lackeys. When the strange villain finally gets back on his feet, he starts to laugh and gloats as he says, "You're so cool. Even if I injure you, you're still willing and able to hold your own in a fight where you're at a disadvantage. Not bad, Eraserhead. Unfortunately for you, I'm not the final boss, that is." As the villain says this, he smirks and points to a large creature that suddenly appears behind Eraserhead. When the creature grabs Aizawa, it starts beating him down ruthlessly, breaking his arms like twigs and slamming his head into the ground repeatedly. The creature continues to maul the pro as the three students watch in horror. Deku readies himself to help his teacher, but before he can, the decay villain raises his hand as he walks up to the broken pro, signaling the creature to stop in its rampage. The villain kneels down next to Aizawa and starts talking to him. "Impressive, wouldn't you say? I'm Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains, and this is Nomu," gesturing the creature as he says its name. "And he's our anti-symbol of peace created specifically to destroy All Might. That's actually one of the reasons why we're here. And while you can't help us with that, you can at least help me with a second objective. If not, then I'll just kill you and all your precious students until I accomplish it. Understand? So tell me, which one of these brats is the son of All Might?" We continue back to the USJ as Shigaraki is standing over a broken and beaten Eraserhead, introducing himself and his anti-symbol of peace, Nomu, when he asks a surprising question. "So tell me, which one of those brats is All Might's son?" Confused, Aizawa looks up at Shigaraki with blurred vision, answering, "I don't know what you're talking about. All Might doesn't have a kid. Hell, I don't even think he's been married once in his entire life." Tomura scowls at Aizawa, snapping his fingers to signal Nomu to start breaking the pro once more by smashing a few bones in Eraserhead's left arm to dust. As Shigaraki retorts, "I said that if you didn't tell me what I wanted to know, then I would kill your students until I found what I'm looking for. But since I have some respect for you, I'll ask you one more time. Tell me who All Might's son is." Aizawa replies that he has no idea what the villain is talking about, honestly telling the truth, but Tomura believes it's all lies, and before he orders Nomu to deal some more pain, he states, "Either you think that I'm an idiot, or you're one, but it doesn't matter. I told my coons that they could hurt your students as much as they like, provided that they at least bring them all to me barely alive. So I'll get my answers either way, from them or you, once I kill a few myself. But in the meantime, I'm happy to watch my pet break you a little more." Shigaraki then gives the order for Nomu to continue, which it mindlessly does, narrowly tearing Aizawa apart. Izuku, alongside with Sui and Mineta, watch as the monster continues to destroy their teacher, not even able to think about the question that the villain kept asking. After a few short seconds, Izuku snaps out of his shock, quickly telling his two comrades to be ready to grab Eraserhead, when there's an opening before running straight off towards Shigaraki, pushing himself to 15% throughout his whole body. Deku swiftly appears next to Shigaraki, and before the villain can dodge, Izuku deals a powerful right hook, sending his foe flying. when he turns and punches Nomu in its exposed brain, thinking that it's a weak spot, but the attack doesn't even faze the creature. This catches Deku off guard, and as he lands back on the ground, Shigaraki slowly gets to his feet. He points at Izuku, telling Nomu to fetch, which causes the creature to charge forward and backhand Deku into the ground, leaving a small crack where he hit. While this is happening, Mineta and Sui run up, managing to grab Mr. Aizawa without the large beast noticing. However, Shigaraki does see them running off with the pro, but decides that he has something potentially more important, letting them go as they rush up towards the staircase with their teacher. Izuku attempts to get up, but Nomu stomps on him, cracking the ground more and effectively trapping him beneath what felt like a tank. Midoriya tries to get himself free with every ounce of strength he has, punching the ground along with Nomu's foot, but gets nowhere, and is unable to do anything as Shigaraki walks over to him, with a slight grin on his face as he kneels down and says, "Not bad. You're pretty fast and strong, kid. I have a suspicion you heard what I said too, and yet, knowing what you knew, you still jumped in to try to save someone else, regardless of what happened to yourself. Maybe you're the one I'm looking for, because I already hate you just as much as I hate All Might." Meanwhile, with the students at the gate as Sui and Mineta get to the top of the stairs, they, along with everyone else, witness the warp villain turn black hole against 13, severely injuring her, causing everyone to freeze with terrified expressions on their faces. But Ida refuses to stand there and do nothing, so he activates his quirk, using it to speed past the villain. As Ida approaches the exit, Mist appears in front of him, all while the warping villain gives chase, but with everyone's help, he's able to make it past the warp gate and get to the door, where he starts to pry it open. The villain attempts to stop Ida once more, but Uraraka manages to touch the piece of his armor, making him float, while Sui uses her tongue to throw him further away from the exit, allowing the class rep to escape the USJ. Not resting for even a second, he uses Recipro Burst to get to UA as fast as possible. Once the warp villain sees the student escape, he goes back to Shigaraki, telling him about the issue, irritating Tomura profusely as he begins to scratch his neck frantically while growling. "Kogori, if I didn't need you to get us and our prize out of here, I'll turn you into dust this very second." After a few more seconds, Shigaraki progressively calms down and smirks as he looks at Izuku. "Well, at least we do have a prize, so this isn't too bad. It will crush All Might when he finds out that we've taken his son. And if we kill a few of his students as well, then it would be even better." Tomura then looks at the entrance and takes a few steps towards it when Deku yells out, "Stop! Don't even try it! I'm not sure why you think I'm the son of All Might, but regardless if I am or not, I won't let you hurt anyone else! Not while I'm here!" Shigaraki looks back and walks towards Izuku, saying, "Don't bother. My master told me that All Might passed his wretched quirk onto his own son, who is just as self-righteous as him. It's you, I know it is, because you somehow think you could do anything while at the mercy of my Nomu." Tomura sits down in front of Izuku and continues with a condescending tone. "Seriously, kid, what do you think you could do while trapped like this?" Once Shigaraki says this, Izuku glares at him and instantly charges up 100% of his power into both of his ring fingers, pointing them at Nomu, and flicks them, releasing the energy all at once, creating a massive air pressure wave that easily knocks away Shigaraki and lifts up Nomu long enough for Midoriya to roll out from the spot where he was trapped. After Izuku jumps up and uses 11% in his legs to gain some distance, readying himself for the fight, but Tomura just stands back up and looks at Deku with an exhausted look, saying, "And bingo. That just proved me right. All Might uses air pressure waves to his advantage, and while suppressing your power does make it seem like you have different quirks, it's clear as day when you use your full power that the two of you have the same quirk. So don't even try to lie to me now. Your dad is All Might." Izuku stands there for a minute trying to think of what to do, but decides that he has to distract them for as long as possible until help arrives, and get some information while he was at it. So he calmly asks, I still have no idea what you're talking about, but since I can't convince you, I want to know exactly what you want with me and why you're doing this other than kill All Might or make him suffer. Shigaraki stands there for a couple of seconds, scratching his neck and pondering what to say when Kurogori answers instead. You'll find out soon enough what we've planned, young man, but for now, be patient. Kurogori turns to Shigaraki telling him, Tamura, I understand your frustration, but we must leave now, so end this. We need only to bring him back alive. Once he hears this, Shigaraki gets a massive distorted grin on his face and gleefully says, You're right, as long as he's alive, I can bring him back with no limbs at all if I wanted to. This will be fun. Shigaraki then orders Nomu to hold Izuku down, which the beast does in an instant, hitting Deku back onto the ground as the twisted villain walks over. When Tamura steps up and puts a hand onto Izuku's left arm, getting ready to decay it, but before he can, a multitude of loud explosions start going off, with the sound getting closer with each one. When Shigaraki is suddenly knocked away by an immense explosion from Bakugo, who yells out, Hey freak! The only one who gets to kill Deku is me! Got it? As that happens, the Nomu looks up when it's immediately frozen solid by a wave of ice from Todoroki, who plainly states, Decent job, but this thing's a real threat. Mind blowing it to pieces while we'll have it frozen like this? Bakugo looks over at the Nomu with a smile, happy to oblige, and unleashes a powerful explosion that is enough to break the creature into multiple pieces. This allows Izuku to get back up with Kirishima helping him, while Kachan berates Deku for being weak, but everyone's attention goes to Shigaraki as he screams out at them for having the nerve to attack him, and Nomu, like that, saying that they'll pay. To which Todoroki replies, I interrogated a few of your lackeys, and I know all about your plan. With the monster out of commission, you won't be able to kill All Might. And you won't be able to take us on without it. So, surrender or leave now. This is your one and only chance. The small group of students get ready to fight, but Tamura starts laughing and then points over at Nomu, stating, You really think you've won? Oh, you ignorant brats. I have no idea how in over your heads you actually are. Bear witness to the power of the anti-symbol of peace. While saying this, the group looks over in disbelief to see the creature regenerate its body with no issue. As Nomu rises, it stares down at them with an emotionless face, unnerving everyone, even Bakugo, but Shigaraki continues to brag about Nomu and how it has regeneration and shock absorption, to show that they can't do anything. Meanwhile, back outside, some distance away from the USJ, as a weak form, All Might is walking to the facility. A panicked Ida zooms right past him in a near blur without slowing down, but despite that, All Might recognizes his student and can tell that something must be wrong. So he buffs up and heads straight for the USJ, going at his speed. Back at the facility, as Todoroki, Kirishima, Bakugo, and Izuku stand against the psychotic Shigaraki, his and his cohort Kurogori, and the monstrosity Nomu, their classmates up at the exit notice and watch in suspense, trying to decide if they should or can help, but Uraraka and Sui easily make the choice and start running down, at least to do what they can. However, before they reach the group, Tamura orders Nomu to break the green-haired one and kill the rest, which it immediately tries to do, first charging towards Kirishima, aiming to kill him, but Izuku was expecting this and uses 100% in his legs, breaking them in the process to get in front of his friend. Deku then throws a punch at Nomu's face, but his arm is grabbed before the attack can hit. And the beast effortlessly crushes Izuku's arm, then proceeds to start slamming him into the ground like a ragdoll. In reaction, Bakugo sets off an explosion while Kirishima hardens his arms and punches Nomu in the gut, but this only succeeds in turning its attention onto them, and in one moment, it attacks with a single sideswipe, knocking them both out on the spot. Todoroki attempts to freeze Nomu again, but it jumps over him to avoid the ice attack, And as it lands, the creature uses Izuku to hit Todoroki into the ground, knocking him out as well. This leaves only Deku conscious, but barely. Nomu then looks towards the stairs where it sees Uraraka and Sui standing there, petrified, and begins to slowly walk over to them, with Izuku kicking and screaming to make it stop. But Nomu just grabs one of his legs, getting ready to pulverize it even more than it already is. When the doors to the USJ suddenly burst open as All Might jumps through them, temporarily halting the event, but once he sees Aizawa, 13, and a multiple of students injured, along with some monster holding a beaten Izuku, the symbol of peace doesn't hesitate. All Might leaps into action, and in a split second, he grabs the arm of Nomu, bending it and breaking them to force it to let go of his son. Once it does, All Might deals a devastating backhand to Nomu's head, knocking it away long enough for him to get Deku and the other injured students. As he brings them all over to Uraraka and Sue, All Might asks them both to look after the injured, which they agree to on the spot. And once he sets the 4 students on the ground, All Might is about to charge in when Izuku stops him, saying in a weak, dull voice, "I'm sorry, that thing was too strong. It has a regeneration quirk and shock absorption quirk. Please be careful, don't die." All Might replies, trying to comfort his son, "Don't worry, I won't. You did great holding up until now, all of you did. But now leave the rest to me, because I'm here now to make this scum pay." As All Might walks away, Uraraka and Sue hurry to carry everyone up the stairs using their quirks. Shigaraki looks at All Might menacingly, getting ready to gloat and antagonize him, but he's stopped by an immensely strong punch to the gut, being knocked out along with Kuwagori in no time flat. Right after, though, Nomu instantly rushes forward at All Might, throwing wild punches with some hitting, but Toshinori starts countering the rapid attack, matching Nomu's speed and eventually outpacing it, landing more and more hits. All Might is furious that his son, along with so many other students and fellow pros, got hurt, and furious at himself for not being there to protect any of them, meaning he's not going to hold anything back or give this thing a chance to get back up. The fight continues with All Might getting faster and stronger, with each hit pushing himself further to where he easily starts knocking Nomu all over the place, keeping it from being able to fight back. As this goes on, Bakugo, Todoroki, and Kirishima all wake up to a sight of the greatest hero who ever lived, unleashing an unimaginable amount of power, astounding them and all the other students at the entrance with an unbelievable show of strength. All Might then delivers a crippling uppercut to Nomu, sending it flying into the air, with him jumping up after it to deal the final blow. Gathering all the energy he can, All Might focuses as much power as he can bear into a single fist, shouting, "United States of Smash!" and deals the punch, causing wind currents that blast the entire roof off the USJ and eradicate Nomu into nothing, with 0 traces left of it. As All Might lands back on the ground, everyone is left breathless by the fight, but once a minute passes, all the students at the exit begin to cheer for the symbol of peace, but not all is well yet. Toshinori falls to his knees exhausted, having used up more power than he meant to, and progressively starts to fall out of his buff form in plain view of everyone standing at the exit, with him eventually turning back into his weak form, which shocks everyone, but none more so than Bakugo. Unfortunately, they aren't the only ones to see this. Shigaraki and Kuwagori awaken to a shriveled up All Might, initially surprising, but they soon realize what happened and decide to take a chance to move in for a kill. But they are fortunately stopped by Pro Hero Snipe, who shot at the two with a constant barrage of bullets, forcing them to retreat, but not before Shigaraki cursing All Might's name, promising to be back for him and his son. For now, everything will be okay thanks to the teachers Ida brought back with him. All the other villains are captured with no major resistance, and all the students are safely evacuated from the USJ, finally ending this terrifying event. Once the police and ambulance arrive, everyone with injuries are sent away, with the rest of the students are interviewed by the officer. 13, along with Eraserhead, are rushed to the hospital, where Aizawa is in a highly critical condition and is put into a medically induced coma for surgery, managing to pull through but will be asleep for a bit of time. Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki are all set back to UA. Due to their more minor injuries, they are easily healed by Recovery Girl and are sent to the office to meet up with the rest of their class. But Bakugo wanders off to get answers. As for All Might and Izuku, they are brought to UA as well. While Deku does have some bad injuries, it's nothing serious enough for him to need to go to the hospital and is sufficiently healed by Recovery Girl. When Midoriya wakes up, he sees a bandaged All Might and a frantic Inko right next to his bed, where his mother immediately hugs him crying, saying how scared she was, whilst All Might pats his son on the head, giving him a big smile. However, this just makes Izuku tear up as he apologized to his dad for failing to stop the villains himself, but Toshinori hugs his son and replies, "No, don't apologize, you're just a kid who's still learning, and yet you were able to save Aizawa from being killed and stalled those villains long enough for me to get there. If it weren't for you, who knows how many would have died. I'm so proud of you." This makes Izuku immensely happy and he starts crying a little because of it, which is when Inko and Toshinori look at each other and smile while hugging their son in loving embrace. Although this moment doesn't last very long, when Bakugo bursts through the doors in a rage, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Deku, you damn bastard! You have a little ton of explaining to do before I start destroying this whole school in the next 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3! We continue our story back at UA right after the attack on the USJ, with All Might and Inko confronting their son in the infirmary. Bakugo bursts through the doors in a rage, ready to confront Izuku and All Might, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Deku, you damn bastard! You have a little ton of explaining to do before I start destroying this whole school in the next 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3! In reaction, Toshiro steps in front of Bakugo, interrupting his yelling and asking him to please calm down, but Kacchan glares down at his shriveled up idol and pushes him aside, harshly stating, "Shut up, All Might or Toshiro, or whatever your name is. I'm not talking to you. Even if I was, I don't care what you have to say." Bakugo then turns his attention back to Izuku as he walks over to him, shouting once again, "How is that your stepdad is All Might? And how is it that he's like this? None of this is making any sense, and it's pissing me off. So start explaining everything to me now." Deku, feeling slightly nervous, looks to All Might for advice, but only sees his father nodding for him to go ahead and explain. Sheepishly, Deku explains the situation, quacking ever so slightly as he does so. "Kacchan, I'm sorry for not telling you the truth sooner. There's a lot of reasons, and it's a long story, but I need to set the record straight. All Might never really married my mom. We just said he was my stepdad, so no one would be suspicious why he was around so much while he was training and teaching me." Hearing this clearly frustrated and confused Bakugo more, causing him to ask Deku why the symbol of peace would train a loser like him. All Might then answered Deku, bluntly stating, "Because Deku's my real biological son." Kacchan, in disbelief, looks over at Toshiro, shaking his head, asking if this was some kind of joke, but All Might responds, "No, young man, it isn't. You see, years ago me and Inko dated. We never married because of the attention it would bring, and we accidentally had Deku, which we also kept hidden to avoid attention." Bakugo, with a blank expression, just stands in the middle of the room, still trying to process the fact that this is even true. While All Might continues to speak, "I was never there for him until recently. Heck, I basically abandoned him and his mother back then. I know you have a lot of questions, and there's a lot we need to tell you, and we will, but only if you promise to keep this all a secret." Kacchan, snapping out of his denial, grunts, saying that he'll keep quiet about this, and sits down as All Might explains more about everything. This includes his injury, along with Sir Night-Eye's prediction of the future, along with a few other things like training Deku to be his successor, but make sure to leave out everything regarding One for All. Once Toshiro finishes answering all of Bakugo's questions, he waits for a response, and after a minute of silence, Kacchan looks up annoyed and asks, "Okay, let me see if I understand correctly. You basically had a kid with Izuku's mom, and bailed on them because they were both going to die according to the prediction of the future. But somehow, it's okay to be in contact now, and you're training Izuku to make up for being absent in his life for so many years. Is that right?" All Might slightly laughs and replies, yeah, that's pretty much it, young Bakugo. I have to say that it's a pretty good generalization of all of it. Though there's some context you're missing, but you're quite spot on otherwise. After saying this, a short moment of silence passes when Toshiro sighs and says, Look, I know this is a lot to take in, and it sounds quite odd in general, but... Before All Might could finish talking, Bakugo cuts him off by jumping up from his seat, flustered, yelling, No shit, this sounds odd. Hell, it sounds insane. A complete convoluted situation. But I can't see why you'd lie about it, so I don't know what to think about it. Kacchan continues to stand with a faint look of confusion and anger on his face. When Inko walks up to him, asking if he's okay, Bakugo answers with a cold yet calm tone. Yeah, I'm fine. Look, I'll keep your secret. Just don't ever bother me with this again, okay? Toshiro, Izuku, and Inko all agree to leave Kacchan out of this, while also thanking him for keeping it a secret. Bakugo then just nods his head at them and starts walking out of the infirmary, but not before stopping in the doorway and saying to Izuku, Hey Deku, you're a damn disappointment of a son for All Might. You know that? You spent years being useless and you still kind of are, so you better shape up. I mean, what kind of message would it send if the #1 hero had a weak son? Izuku is taken aback by this comment, and as he tries to come up with a response, Kacchan looks back at him, firmly stating, However, just so you know, even with the world's greatest hero in your corner, you won't ever beat me. I'll surpass your old man, easily, and if that means you really want to challenge me, then you'll have to go beyond him too. Bakugo then points to himself and slightly yells out, I'll show the whole world how great I am! Even better than All Might, got it? I expect one hell of a rematch from you to prove it so you don't disappoint. Understand, Deku? This helps Izuku understand what Bakugo is trying to say, and with a confident grin on his face, Midoriya gives a thumbs up to his rival as he stumbles up to stand, confidently replying, Sure thing! I got it, Kacchan. But who says you're going to win our rematch? I won't go down without a fight. I'll be much stronger the next time we face off. You can count on that, so don't underestimate me. Bakugo gets a slight smirk from Izuku's response, but turns away and says, Ha! You damn nerd! Stop trying to act confident. You'll never beat me, but by all means try. Otherwise it won't be very fun when I kick your ass. As Bakugo chuckles and walks out of the infirmary, Izuku, All Might, and Inko breathe a sigh of relief, knowing their secret is safe for now. A short time later, the police do a few more interviews with the students, like Todoroki, Bakugo, and Izuku once they've recovered enough to get as much information for the case as possible. While that happens, Recovery Girl finishes checking on the other students, ensuring they are uninjured and don't need any healing. After the officers finish their questioning, they leave to begin the investigation on Shigaraki and the League of Villains. Now, even though Deku does mention to the police that Shigaraki has a master and that Tomura believes he's All Might's son, with some convincing from Toshinori and Tsukauchi's influence, they get the officers to determine that it isn't actually true and promise to keep the info from the public so more people won't go after Izuku and his mother. A few minutes after the police left, Principal Nezu calls Class 1A into his office, where he takes the opportunity to apologize to all of them for what happened, while also asking them not to mention anything about All Might's weak form to the public or press, which they agree to. After this, Nezu thanks them for their understanding and sends them all home with the police and hero escorts. To finally and hopefully put this stressful and dark day behind the students. Meanwhile, at the League of Villains hideout, Shigaraki is irate and furious about his defeat. So much so that he's throwing what is basically a tantrum, where he's using his quirk to decay many nearby objects to blow off steam. As this goes on, Kuwagiri stands at the end of the bar, well, what's left of it, and attempts to calm Tomura down for the 7th time, but Shigaraki interrupts his subordinate and violently replies, Silence! You don't tell me what to do, Kuwagiri. You do as I say, when I say. Just be grateful that I let you live after your complete and utter fail. Do not make me rethink that decision. Kuwagiri nods his head, but then points at the monitor and responds, Yes, Tomura. But you must know that the Master wishes to speak to you about the failed mission. As we speak, I believe you've kept him waiting long enough. Once Kuwagiri says this, the voice of Shigaraki's master emits from the monitor, causing Tomura to immediately look over at it and bow, groveling and apologizing as he does so. But his master calmly states with a relaxed tone, Now, Shigaraki. There is no need for this. It's natural to have setbacks and even more so to be frustrated by it. But remember, you must learn to stay composed and from your failures if you are to succeed me. Tomura agrees from his master to learn from this and continues to apologize for his failure, but is stopped by his master, who says, My dear Tomura, this is no failure. Yes, you did lose our Nomu, but the fight undoubtedly weakened All Might. And from what Kuwagiri told me, you also identified who his son is, correct? Shigaraki looks up at the monitor with a massive grin and answers, Yes, Master, I have. I don't know his name, but he has messy green hair and green eyes. As for his power, it's definitely like All Might's. I know it has to be him, and I'm sure I can find out what his name is. Before Shigaraki can continue, his master puts a picture of Izuku up on the screen and asking if this is All Might's son, which Tomura says it is, but does cause him to ask his master if he knew it was Izuku all along, which his master answers, I had a hunch but don't know for sure. All I know was that All Might had a son and was in UA, but that was it. Shigaraki's master pauses for a brief second before continuing. You may think of me as an all-knowing deity, Tomura, but I merely just have the power of one. I am still limited in certain aspects and needed you to help me confirm who All Might's son really is, which you have successfully done. Meaning we can plan our next move much easier. Thank you. After hearing this, Shigaraki puts his head back down, saying, Thank you, Master, Before Tomura can finish, his master stops him and says, Please, Tomura, no need to be formal. Just call me by my name. After all, you are my successor, and family as far as I'm concerned. Shigaraki looks back at the monitor with a smile and restates, Thank you, All for One. I swear to you that next time I see All Might, I'll turn him to dust. Once Tomura says this, All for One tells him to be patient and focuses on rebuilding the league for the time. The monitor then turns off, as a determined Shigaraki stands up and sets off to prepare for his new plan. The next day is fairly calm for all the students of Class 1A, mainly due to the fact they were given a day off to recuperate from the events of the previous day. However, it's less relaxing for Izuku as he spends the day packing up his room along with the rest of the apartment. You see, after everything that happened at the USJ, and once Deku told his dad about Shigaraki figuring out that they are related, it was incredibly clear to All Might that his son and Inku are going to be targeted by villains now. So he decided to have them both move to a secure penthouse where they would be much safer, while he would also move to a new place as well. When Izuku and his mom finish packing up and load everything onto a moving truck, they leave for their new home with pro hero Hound Dog escorting them during the trip. Meanwhile at UA, a weak form All Might is in the middle of a meeting with Principal Nezu, upper faculty members, and Detective Tsukauchi, who is leading the investigation on the League of Villains. During this meeting, they discuss what they have already found, which isn't much. Future security for the school and students, along with some other things, like mentioning that Izuku told the police, which does cause a bit of an uproar and confusion, but once the conversation turns to what little they know about the League, President Mike harshly interjects, stating, Well, at least we know 2 reasons why they attacked, thanks to Izuku Midoriya, who according to some nutjob is All Might's kiddo, but I'm curious if there isn't some truth there. President Mike glares over at All Might, with a few others doing the same, as Toshinori tries to respond, Look, I know I keep secrets like my weakened state, but you can't possibly believe. Before All Might can finish, President Mike stands up, interrupting the symbol of peace and snapping at him, saying, Okay, then let's look at the facts. This Shigaraki was sent by his master to not only kill you, but also believe you have a son, and made it their mission to find out who he is to get to you. All of this looks like a vendetta against you, or they at least had enough of reasons to pull a stunt like this. So I'm wondering if you're not hiding something. Trying to think of what to say next, Toshinori, in response, looks at Shikauchi and Nezu for their thoughts. So All Might reluctantly says, "You're right. I have been keeping a secret. Izuku is my son, but I only recently started to be in his life. I left him and his mom because I was scared of villains going after them, just like now. I'm sorry for keeping this a secret. It's clear now that that was a mistake." After hearing this, President Mike slams his hands on the table in frustration, shouting at All Might, "It was a lot more than just a simple mistake. You should have told us that a bunch of maniacs were potentially targeting you and your family so we could have taken better precautions. But because you didn't tell us, not only were students hurt, but wasn't 13 and Eraser is still in a coma? Injured so bad that Recovery Girl can't even fix him completely?" After this outburst, Nezu asks President Mike to calm down and tries to alleviate the situation when Detective Tsukauchi speaks up. "Look, I understand your frustration, but All Might kept this hidden because he was scared for his family's safety and unsure who he could trust. Pinning the blame on him does nothing except divide you, and that energy would be better spent trying to catch these villains." This helps calm down most of the faculty, but many still are unsettled, causing Midnight to voice her thoughts. "I know this isn't Toshinori's fault, and I agree we need to focus on the League, but it's inevitable that these villains weren't just targeting him because he's the #1 hero. Not to mention that someone knew he had a son who was going to UA. That's a lot of questions that we need answered." As she says this, Midnight turns to All Might and continues asking, "You need to tell us everything. We're all on the same side. You can trust us." All Might thinks for a moment, but quickly agrees to tell them more, including his suspicion of Shigaraki's master is the villain that gave him his injury. But Toshinori ensures to leave out anything related to One for All and what All for One's quirk really is. The rest of the meeting is spent discussing ideas of what to do for future security and multiple other things, but ends a short time later. When All Might leaves UA, he starts heading to his new place a few blocks away. Since Shigaraki knows what Toshinori looks like in his weak form, All Might made the choice to live at a different place until him and Inko can figure everything out, or until it's safer. But All Might is determined not to let this separate him from his family, so we won't be cutting off contact by any means. When Toshinori gets home, he calls up Inko, starting a conversation that lasts a couple of hours, where they talked about how they handle all of this, or what to do, and by the end of it, they get ideas about a few things. The next day at UA, as classes are about to start, a buffed up All Might is sitting in the teacher's lounge, staring at a note with a worried look on his face, when President Mike walks in, greeting him, saying, "Hey All Might, listen, I'm sorry about the meeting yesterday. When I turned up my volume on you, it wasn't a rockin' thing to do, and blaming you for it was even more of a bummer." All Might looks up at his fellow faculty member and tells him that it's fine, before looking back at the note on the table, causing President Mike to notice the look on his face and asks, "So I guess you're nervous about what kind of tunes you should give Class 1A. I hope you're ready to rock whatever it is you're going to tell them." Toshinori takes a second to think, before standing up and answering, "I don't think I'll rock it, but I at least should be able to answer all the questions that they'll have for me. Wish me luck." As Toshinori starts walking towards the door, President Mike opens it for All Might and tells him to break a leg, which he thanks Mike for as he strolls down the hall towards Class 1A to face his students. We continue our story at UA with Class 1A. As they are waiting for the bell to ring, they discuss the events that happened in the USJ along with the news cover about it and the attention that their class has been getting since the attack. This only goes on for a few short minutes until the bell rings, and everyone sits in their desk to wait for their substitute teacher, while also wondering who it will be. Then a couple of seconds later, a buffed All Might bursts through the doors, greeting the class with a bright smile and a cheerful hello. This surprises the whole class, including Izuka, but they remain quiet as the symbol of peace walks up to the podium, saying, "It's a pleasure to see you all again, especially after everything that happened in the USJ. Now we have quite a bit of things to cover today, but I understand if any of you have questions, so I wanted to take some time to answer any inquiries or concerns you may have. Please feel free to ask me anything." After this, a moment of silence goes by with All Might's students feeling unsure what to ask. But eventually, Sue breaks the ice by asking how Mr. Aizawa was doing, which Toshinori replies to saying, "He's doing fine. Unfortunately, Aizawa is still in a medically induced coma, but he's stable and should wake up in a few days. However, he'll need to be in the hospital for a few weeks after, so in the meantime, I'll act as his replacement." Hearing about their teachers worries a handful of the class, but are at least happy to know he'll recover. A few other small questions are then asked, but everyone is still avoiding the big one because they don't really know how to say it. Through a frustrated Bakugo wanting to move on, suddenly and bluntly asks, "Alright, since everyone else is too chicken to ask, what's with the weak and pathetic form you turned into after the fight with those villains? I'm sure we're all dying to know, so just tell us already." This question causes the class to look at Kachan, not expecting anyone to ask the question like that. But they all look back at All Might, curious to hear his answer. In response, All Might goes down into his weak form and explains his injury, mentioning that he got it from a villain, but does leave out specific details, also lies about his quirk slightly, saying that it allows him to transform and use incredible power, which everyone buys with exception of Izuku and Bakugo for obvious reasons. Once All Might finishes his explanation, and a few more follow-up questions are asked by different students. Though the biggest one is if the injury negatively affects his hero work, and he honestly answers that it does, which concerns everyone but Toshinori, still in his weak form, simply smiles and says, "Hey, no reason to worry. I could still take on just about any villain. I just won't be doing it so often. I know you're worried about me along with the future too, but I'll have to retire at some point. That's why I became a teacher, here to help you young heroes in training, like yourselves, to reach the full potential, and I'm confident that you'll all become pros. Then you'll easily be the next symbol of peace, who can take my place." This calms everyone down, though they're still a little on edge about knowing All Might's condition. They are feeling better about it. Toshinori then asks if there are any more questions that they have. In a brief moment of consideration, Sue raises her hand, asking, "All Might, I was wondering if you could... Can you tell us what the leader of villains was interrogating Mr. Aizawa about? Me and Mineta did hear him mention something about you, but we were too freaked out to really process what he was saying." This catches Toshinori a little off guard, but he plays it off cool and quickly answers, "Oh well, thanks to what young Midoriya had told us, we know that they were trying to get personal information on me. Like family or close friends, but since Aizawa didn't know anything, they were unable to learn much, so there's nothing to worry about there." With this answer, no one else has any more to ask, so All Might gives a request to everyone to not mention any of this to anyone, and they all agree to keep it a secret. Toshinori then moves on to informing the class about the UA Sports Festival. Hearing about the sports festival gets the class excited, having completely forgotten it was even coming up, but a few students question if it's a good idea to hold it after the villain attack, but All Might explains that the administration thinks it's a good way to show that UA is safer than ever. All Might also mentions that it will be fine due to the extra security that the school is getting, but the biggest reason why the festival will be held is that it's a huge opportunity for all the students at UA, so it's not something that they can just cancel or postpone. All Might proceeds to explain more about its importance some more, but at the end of this he says, "I know it sounds odd, but trust me, the sports festival is bigger than you think. If you can show off your talents well enough during it, you could be set off for a great path to become a pro. You only have one chance a year, and 3 chances in a lifetime. No aspiring hero can afford to miss this festival." This last remark makes everyone feel more determined and aesthetic for the sports festival, but they don't dwell on it for long. After some time, during a break, most of Class 1A hangs back and talks about the sports festival, getting more hyped for it as they do. Though Uraraka is clearly the most excited, as she keeps going around saying that she'll be giving it her all and telling everyone else to do their best in an attempt to pump them up more, and is generally being quiet and tense compared to how she normally is, confusing pretty much everyone there. Since no one knows what to say, they just let her keep going, and eventually the remainder of the class heads down to the cafeteria with Ida, Uraraka, Sue, Kirishima, and Izuka heading there together as a group. While on the way to the cafeteria, Izuka stops the group and asks Uraraka why she was acting so intense, and she really doesn't know how to respond, so Ochaku embarrassedly says that she's just really excited. A short conversation then starts, which leads Sue, who's a little curious, to ask Uraraka why she wanted to become a hero. And Uraraka admits that it's for the money, which does surprise the group and embarrass Uraraka because of how selfish it sounds, but she tries to explain her reason, more saying, "I know it sounds really selfish, but please don't take it the wrong way. I do want to help people, but I also want to give my parents an easy life. They've worked so hard and have had to worry about money all the time. I really want to make it so that they don't ever have to be stressed out again. And take it easy, you know? Once everyone hears Uraraka's explanation, they feel her reason is pretty admirable, telling Ochako that is just as valid as their reasons to be pros, and that she isn't selfish at all, making her feel better about it. As the conversation is about to move to everyone else's reason for becoming a hero, All Might arrives in his weak form and greets his students. This causes the group to stop talking and hesitantly say hi, calling him All Might by accident, not knowing what else to call him. Though Izuku is an exception, actually saying nothing. Toshinori then looks around, worried others heard them, and quickly whispers in response, "Listen, I understand that this is very strange and you're still trying to wrap your head around this, but in the future, when I'm not all buffed up, please refer to me as Mr. Yagi, so no more people find out who I am. Remember, it's imperative that we keep this a secret." Su, Ida, Uraraka, and Kirishima all apologize and promise to call All Might by Mr. Yagi when it's necessary. After this, Toshinori apologizes for interrupting them during their conversation, but states that he needs to speak to Izuku about some important things. Naturally, Deku's friends ask about it, and All Might just says that it's just some stuff about the investigation, along with him wanting to check up on Izuku and thank him properly for the heroic job he did during the USJ, which helps to satisfy the group's curiosity. Happy with the reason given, Ida, Su, Uraraka, and Kirishima head to the lunchroom with no hesitation, as Midori leaves with All Might to talk in the teacher's lounge. Before we get back into the story, I'd like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What If? We the Celestials Naruto What If mainly focuses on our Naruto What If series. If you're interested in content like this, please go check out the description down below. Now with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. Once Deku's friends make it into the cafeteria and get in line, they begin talking about how Deku is so lucky to be getting praise from All Might for what he did, while also wondering if All Might is interested in Deku's abilities, which catches the attention of Todoroki, who was listening in, causing him to wonder about a few things himself. Meanwhile, with Deku and his dad in the teacher's lounge, as they both sit down, All Might asks his son how he's been doing, trying to make sure he's okay after everything that happened. Deku answers saying that he still feels bad about failing to handle the villains during the attack, but his father comforts him, saying that he did better than most students could have done, making Deku feel slightly better. Then, due to Deku being concerned for his dad, questions him about how he's been feeling since the attack, which is when All Might reveals that he can only be in his buff form for half an hour, shocking Midoriya quite a bit, causing him to inquire how it's even possible to go from a few hours to only 30 minutes. And All Might replies, "Well, you see, All for One has different facets of power. Though I don't understand it fully myself, it is possible to tap into its full power, and I mean more than 100%. Toshinori pauses, looking at his hands as he continues. "And another thing to remember is that, in passing All for One to you, I'm left with only remnants of the power. It's like if I handed you a torch, and I'm only left with embers of it that get used up the more I use the power. And because I tapped into the true power of One for All to use my United States of Smash during the fight with that Nomu, I lost a ton of those embers, meaning it won't be long before I'm powerless and unable to be a pro." This makes Deku worry even more about his father, but All Might just laughs and says, "Ha ha ha! Don't sweat it, kiddo. This is my fault in the first place, for letting my emotions get the better of me. I was just furious when I saw you, Aizawa, 13, and the other students injured. I was furious with myself and those villains, so I lost control. But I'll deal with this like I always do. Okay? We should move on. There's more important things to talk about other than this." While Deku is worried, this helps him to relax. For now, his father moves on to the main topic. All Might admits to Deku that the main reason he wanted to talk to him is to discuss the sports festival and check up how he's adjusting to using One for All. Deku talks about his minor progress so far, but most importantly, he mentions that he used One for All at 100% multiple times during the USJ attack, and how it broke his finger during it. Toshinori then tells Deku that it seems that he'll need to train much more so that Deku can be ready when the time comes for the symbol of peace to retire. This concerns Deku, but also confuses him slightly. All Might clarifies, saying that with his retirement unfortunately having to happen very soon, he will have to be strong enough to handle the villains that will inevitably rise up, and be able to take the mantle of the #1 hero. All Might then asks Izuku if he still wants to become the next symbol of peace for the world, which Midori says he does, though is unsure about his abilities But Toshinori, trying to encourage his son, tells him that he's more than capable and that he'll be able to prove to himself during the sports festival. As All Might continues, he states that the entire country will be watching the festival, telling Izuku to think of it as a debut and introduce himself to the world as the next great hero by winning and proudly stating, "I am here for all to hear." A little unsure how to respond, Deku is feeling hesitant about this, still trying to take in everything from before. But after thinking for a moment, he pushes his doubts aside and gives a confident look to his dad. Toshinori smiles at his son, lending more encouragement and support, but once there's a free moment, Izuku finally gets up an opportunity to ask his father if he has any ideas of who Shigaraki's master could be, but All Might brushes the question off and tells Deku that they'll talk more about it at home. With that response, Toshinori tells Izuku to head on back to class. Back with Class 1A, as they're starting to pack up to head home, a large number of students from the other courses gather around their door, making it so they can't leave. Ida asks the crowd if they have some sort of business with their class, but before an answer can be given, Bakugo abruptly interrupts, saying that they clearly have to check out the competition, and proceeds to egg on the large group. As this happens, a student named Shinzo steps out of the crowd and calls out Kachan by throwing an insult back at him and towards Class 1A, clearly annoying Bakugo in the process. Shinzo then takes this opportunity to warn Kachan and the rest of Class 1A that if they're not careful during the sports festival, then they'll lose their spot in the hero course to him. Shinzo basically declares war on Class 1A, with others in the crowd doing the same as Bakugo just walks through ignoring them all, frustrating the mob further. Once Deku goes home, All Might arrives an hour later, and with Inko, they sit their son down to have an important talk, where Toshinori mainly reveals the true origin of One for All, along with mentioning a villain named All for One, explaining his overwhelming quirk. These facts, of course, leave Izuku dumbfounded, trying to think of how such a quirk can exist, and only responding to ask follow-up questions to understand better. This is how he also finds out his father's injury came from the very same villain that made One for All. With everything that Izuku just learned, he's able to make a connection and ask his dad if All for One could have created the Nomu from the USJ, and if he's also Shigaraki's master, which All Might nods his head with a worried look, replying, "I'm not sure. I thought he died during our last fight years ago, but considering the Nomu had more than one quirk, I say it's unfortunately possible." This unsettles both Izuku and Inko. As a dead silence fills the room, All Might breaks it with more worrisome info. "Son, if One for All is alive, then you'll have to face him just like I did. Maybe face the League of Villains itself. It won't be easy. In fact, it'll probably be the greatest challenge of your life. But I'll do everything in my power to either take care of it before you have to, or at least ensure you're ready if I can't. Either way, you have a big job ahead of you, understand?" Hearing this leads Deku to feel quite a bit more anxious and nervous. Nevertheless, when Izuku thinks back to everything that happened barely 11 months ago, he remembers his dream and the responsibility he now has because of One for All. So Midori, in addition to putting away all of his concerns, also stands up with a determined grin, saying, "Yeah, I get it, but no matter what, I won't let this power go to waste. I'll work hard to become a hero who can stand against anyone, including All for One. After all, I'm the son of All Might. How hard can it be?" All Might smirks and chuckles, telling his son that he's glad to see him determined, but not to get cocky yet, at least until they train a lot more. And with that, the 2 weeks of training before UA Sports Festival begins. During this time, Izuku improves quite a bit with his father's help, but one of the most important things worth mentioning is that they learn something odd when it comes to how Spartan Boost along with One for All affect each other and work with one another. A few days into their training, as Deku practices using One for All and Spartan Boost individually to improve his abilities to use them, him and his father start talking about how the two quirks function, on their own and together. This is where they figure out, or more like assume, that the powers haven't really combined yet. You see, while only Spartan Boost is active, it increases traits like speed, strength, durability, etc. for Izuku, but it doesn't do anything to increase the power of One for All when both quirks are used at the same time. And One for All doesn't seem to do anything to increase Spartan Boost abilities either. The increased durability from Spartan Boost is what makes it so Midoriya can use One for All without hurting himself, but that's all that seems to work together as for now. Understandably, this raises more questions than answers, and they decide to look into it more further down the line. But other than that, Izuku's training progresses well, And by the end of the 2 weeks, Midoriya with Spartan Boost can increase his physical traits by 3 times and can use 6% of One For All by itself, meaning he can use 18% with no issue when using the 2 quirks at the same time, and is able to use full calling much more often. But while Izuku has made good progress, by no means has anyone else been left behind, like Bakugo, who made massive leaps in handling his quirk and along with his power in general, being driven purely to show Deku up and to finally prove that he's better. Time flew by quickly, and before anyone knew it, it was the morning of the festival. Now with Izuku as him and All Might get ready to head for the sports festival, Inko tells her son to do his best but also be careful and tells Toshinori to cheer him on as well, making them both smile as they walk out the door. At the festival stadium, a large number of people, pros and journalists arrive. Many are excited to see Class 1As in action after hearing everything that happened at the USJ. Meanwhile, back in the waiting room, Ida walks in and informs everyone that they'll be entering the arena soon, telling them to be ready. Though Izuku is acting very calm on the outside, he's decently nervous in his head as he waits. But he isn't the only one, as a few of his classmates are also trying to compose themselves. While everyone readies their nerves for the upcoming competition, Todoroki decides to stand up and walk over to Izuku, feeling that it's the time to say something to his opponent. That's going to be it for today's video. Thank you all for watching to the end. Now, there's a few more things I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writers for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description down below. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up one of the heads of those areas. We're always looking for more members to join us. That's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals, have an amazing day! Now before we get right into it, I would first like to clarify an error that the writers noticed in the last part concerning Izuku's ability. Deku is now able to use 18% of One For All thanks to 3 times boost from Spartan Boosts, and while he can use it fairly easily when it spreads throughout 1 or 2 of his limbs for a decent length of time, he is unable to use it in full call for very long due to the strain it takes on his body. Furthermore, he isn't able to use 18% continuously by any means, and it wears him out the most, but 15% or under is where he feels no major exhaustion or fatigue unless he's using it for long periods of time. Now with that cleared up, let's get into the story. Before the festival starts, as everyone steadies their nerves, Todoroki decides to take this opportunity and walks over to Izuku, where he calls out to him in order to say what's on his mind. Midoriya, from an objective standpoint, I think it's fairly clear that I'm stronger than you. However, from what I've seen, you're far from a pushover. Not to mention that you have All Might in your corner, but I'm not interested in prying on all of that. I just want you to know that I won't be underestimating you, and that I will beat you. This takes everyone aback, especially Izuku, who just stands there trying to think of a response. Kirishima tries to defuse the situation, saying that there's no need to act hostile towards each other so close to the start of the competition. Todoroki then turns in the opposite direction to walk away, snapping as he does so that they aren't here to make friends, and they need to take this seriously, which is when Deku quickly retorts.
Wait a second, Todoroki. I don't know what's going through your head, but I get why you're saying this. At least a little, I think. In terms of raw power, you're definitely stronger than me. But that's not all there is to being a hero, and I'll prove it by beating you!
Kirishima attempts to intermediate again, but is quickly cut off by Izuku as he continues.
No, he's right. All the other courses are coming for us, with everything they've got, not holding anything back. We can't take any of this lightly if we want to become heroes someday.
Looks and feeling of concern yet understanding washes over much of the class at this statement. As many students ponder over this, Midoriya thinks back on his training and hard work to get where he is now, filling him with more determination as he states,
We are all going to have to fight in order to stand out, but I know our classmates are just as capable as me or you. Todoroki, underestimating any of them is a big mistake. I'll be going for the top, but so will everyone else. Watch yourself, otherwise someone will swoop in and take the win. Got it?
Todoroki just looks back with a blank stare and gives a slight nod before walking off. As Bakugo just glares at the both of them ignoring him, Izuku's speech hits everyone else with a sense of motivation and strive for the top, which seals their resolve to go all in for the entirety of the sports festival. After this, Class 1A leaves for the stadium, where the moment they get to the massive entrance, President Mike gets on the speaker and begins pumping up the crowd with an energetic introduction. Welcome one and all to the one and only UA Sports Festival! Now I got one single question for you. Are you ready? In response, a large roar of cheering sweeps through the stadium, as President Mike then proceeds with the rest of his introduction. Alright, that's what I like to hear. It's your coolest JJ around here, President Mike. And I'm here as your rockin' leader, commentator, and announcer, but I'm also joined by first-year Hero Course teacher of Class 1B, Vlad King, as my esteemed backup commentator. This is when Vlad speaks up, saying that he's happy to be here and excited to see all the first-year students, mainly Class 1B, in action. President Mike takes this as his cue to start calling out the first-year classes, which he does with enthusiasm. Well then, I guess we should move this show along and bring out our competitors to their big stage. The crowd cheers in agreement as Mike announces the classes, starting with Hero Course 1A, which gains most of the attention as they walk onto the field, with 1B following soon after. Once President Mike calls out all the other classes, he introduces Pro Hero Midnight as Chief Umpire, which gets the kind of reaction that you would expect. Before anything else could be said, Midnight orders the stadium to quiet down for the student pledge and calls up Izuku Midoriya as the first-year representative. Everyone turns to look at Deku, who quickly feels like the weight of 1,000 eyes bearing down on him. Understandably shaking his nerves, but keeps his composure as he steps towards and onto the stage. Even with his nerves still racking, Midoriya takes a deep breath to steady himself, while his father, All Might, watches from his seat in anticipation of what his son will say. When Izuku finally speaks, Hello, it's a pleasure to be here competing in the UA Sports Festival today. It's something that I've been looking forward to ever since I first decided going to this very school, but I'm not the only one, as a lot of people here have been waiting for this as well, with their own reasons. When Midoriya pauses, many of the students and spectators are a little lost, but keep quiet as he continues. You see, there are a good number of students in the other courses who want to prove themselves during this, so they can get a chance to join the hero track, or show off what they can do in their respective fields. I mention this because all of them are going to be giving everything they've got during the festival, and wanted everyone watching to know that this day isn't just about us in the hero courses. It's about all the students of UA showing what we can do while giving a chance for others with any exceptional talent to reach their goals. This leaves everyone silent as Izuku takes another short pause before staring straight at his fellow peers with a determined look and saying, I swear, I'll be giving this all I have, and I can't wait to see what the rest of you can do. Let's make this a festival no one will ever forget, and go beyond plus ultra! To this, the crowd cheers in excitement and applaud for the speech, with many of the students from the different classes and 1A doing the same. Up in the stands, All Might smiles from pride at what his son said, feeling more confident than ever that he picked the right successor. But meanwhile, far away in a different city, Tomura Shigaraki watches this event on TV with nothing but competent. During this, Izuku walks off the stage and joins with his class, where he receives some praise from them along with the others, but shortly then after, Midnight speaks through her microphone. What a wonderful student pledge. Thank you so much, Midoriya. But now, without further ado, let's start our first competition. With that, the first game to kick off the festival is randomly chosen to be an obstacle race, and once an explanation is given about it, all competitors are directed to gather up at the starting line. Once everyone is standing at the starting line, a countdown is initiated and finishes with Midnight calling for the race to begin. Right after this, crowds of first years swarm forward and into the gateway to the obstacle field, causing a massive backup in the process. As the mass of people struggle to work their way through such a hindrance, Izuku takes a moment to survey his surroundings to figure out a path forward. At that moment, Deku uses both of his quirks to spread 18% of one for all in each leg and jumps on the wall. From there, Midoriya jumps over the opposite wall, moving forward by a few feet and continuing to repeat this process, rapidly making it to the other side in no time. Though at the very same time as this, Todoroki generates an immense surge of ice which instantly freezes a large number of students in its wake, whilst he runs past and onto the other side as well. Believing he's pulled ahead of the pack, Shoto continues to leave a trail of ice behind him in the efforts to slow down any other pursuers, but it's all at the same time that he notices Izuku flying overhead and landing in front of him. As soon as Deku hits the ground, he goes into a full sprint, 18% in both of his legs. The sight of this leaves Todoroki stunned, but he reacts by sending a wave of ice straight at Izuku, which moves swiftly enough to catch up to him in mere seconds and freezes Midoriya in place long enough for Shoto to make his move. With his adversary frozen, Todoroki skates a long surge of ice he creates in an effort to regain the lead, making it close to Izuku at an impressive pace. Just then, Shoto tries to pass by. Deku breaks out of his prison by coursing 12% of All For One throughout his whole body and swings a fist at his nearby opponent. Todoroki notices this but knows that he's unable to dodge and feels such intense energy coming from Izuku that he automatically activates his fire side to defend himself. However, Midoriya is easily able to bypass the flaming defense and deal a powerful gut punch to Todoroki that's strong enough to knock him right off his ice and into the side of a nearby wall. From there, Izuku powers 18% back into his legs and bolts towards the first obstacle as Bakugo flies above the ground, trying to catch up to the front runner. As Todoroki stands back up, many of his fellow classmates are passing him while he just looks at his hands in disappointment of himself, but Shoto regains his senses once a minute passes and uses new determination to get back into the race. By then, Izuku makes it to the field of robots, which are similar to the ones he faced during the entrance exams, including the handful of 0-point bots, all blocking his path, but Midoriya charges in at 14%, full calling, without any hesitation. In the blink of an eye, Deku dispatches a dozen machines effortlessly and continues his onslaught for a brief period, leaving all specters awestruck as they watch on, before a massive attack from a 0-pointer forces him to stop and dodge. At the moment that the gargantuan machine's fist plunges into the ground, Izuku grabs a piece of scrap metal and rushes up the large arm at 15%. While he arrives at the bot's shoulder, Deku focuses 18% in his arm and grips the scrap metal, chucking it with all of his might right at the bot's head. The projectile moves as fast as a bullet and punctures into the 0-pointer's head, hitting a critical component. This causes a series of explosions and ruptures throughout the behemoth, damaging it severely, but as that happens, Izuku hops on the back of the machine and slides down to the ground safely as the damaged machine husk collapses. After a very short rest, Midoriya blitzes a few dozen more smaller bots and makes it out on the field, right as a faint screaming presumably directed at him comes from an enraged Bakugo in the distance. Izuku continues to sprint down the track at a constant 12% for a short period until he comes to a large chasm obstacle, but he simply activates 14% in both legs and begins jumping over the small landings scattered around. Meanwhile, back at the first obstacle, Bakugo has already made it out of there with ease. Shortly after, Todoroki freezes a large horde of machines and a 0-pointer to clear the way in front of him, while also slowing down everyone else behind him once more with ice. Though Todoroki is making slow progress, he is now in third place and is steadily getting further ahead of the main collection of people as he quickly exits the field then and there. A few seconds later, with Midoriya making it through the other side of the chasm swiftly, he bolts forward. At that very moment, his path is open. Conveniently, then Bakugo starts flying over the same impediment at a breakneck pace, creeping ever so slightly closer to Izuku. Some more time goes by, Deku racing along when he comes across the last hurdle, a minefield full of weak explosives, where Izuku decides to play it safe and go through it cautiously by practicing tippy-toeing for a few feet until he hears a distant explosion and shouting coming closer with each passing second. Upon looking back, Midoriya sees Bakugo approaching his location fast and realizes that he doesn't have much time to waste, so Midoriya forgoes safety and darts off using 18% in his legs to run straight through the minefield, which surprisingly goes pretty well. Now, with Izuku's mad dash across a field of explosives, he isn't able to avoid stepping on every single mine, despite his nimble motions, but thanks to the moment that he has currently, Deku does avoid any explosions that do occur and keeps moving without being slowed down. With this new burst of acceleration, Midoriya leaves the exhausted and raging Kacchan in the dust, which pushes Bakugo to go in high gear, creating immense blast to hurry along, but this also begins to strain his arms significantly, and he goes over his limit. By the time Bakugo makes it away from the minefield, he can feel the pain in his arm grow excruciatingly worse with each use of his quirk, but his stubbornness keeps him from stopping for any reason. Around this point, Todoroki finds himself at the minefield and briefly considers taking it slow, but refusing to waste any more time. He just freezes over all the explosives to make an unhindered pathway so he can reach the finish as fast as possible. Now with nothing to really interfere, Shoto briskly sprints along, lagging distantly behind the two leaders. At that very same moment, Bakugo's determination keeps burning as he pushes forward at full force, but it however doesn't pay off as Midoriya crosses the finish line triumphantly in first place, ahead of the central pack of competitors by a long ways, which leads the crowd to cheer in amazement, while the tired green-haired student sits and rests on the ground, proud of his victory. A minute later, Kacchan follows over the finish line, getting second place, landing fairly rough, and lies on the ground panting heavily from exhaustion due to such an overuse of his power, all in an effort to purely beat Deku. Gathering what little strength he has left, Bakugo sits up and glares at Izuku with an intense rage derived from actually losing to him. Wanting to yell at the top of his lungs and blow up the damn nerd, Bakugo attempts to move but finds that his body is simply unable to, and after a brief period of effort, he realizes just how raged he ran himself. This along with him seeing the visible physical strain he put on his hands and arms. The explosive student just lies back to rest while also soaking in the feeling of his first real defeat at the hands of none other than Izuku Midoriya, the last person he ever thought he'd lose to. Thank you all for indulging yourself in this story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, there are a few more things I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some ramen and some jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description down below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here on We the Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description down below. Our Discord is all around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join the band of misfits, we're always looking for more members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching. Have a great day!